We'll reconvene on day 3. I think we've got our timing about right. It's just in a slightly different order. All right. So just a quick recap. We were at in the process. We're going to hear from Ms. Lucas this morning, and you're the final submitter who's presented statements or evidence. We have got some tabled statements which the panel will read in our own time. And then we might take a short adjournment at that time, because the officers, I understand, are busy still writing their presentation notes. We'd like to hear those, and we'll go through those, and then we'll be in a position to have some comments from the applicant, which might be verbal, but we would certainly like written right or reply in due course. But you're free to make any comments you may wish to at this point as well. So, and that'll take us to the end of proceedings today. So what we'll do now, Ms. Lucas, is we'll get underway with you. We have got your statement of evidence. I've got it here. Now, first of all, I just needed to cover that aspect of the code of conduct. You have acknowledged that you're aware of the code of conduct for expert witnesses, and that you've stated in your evidence that you've abided by that. And the applicant's counsel has advised us, and we welcome your comment on this, that 2 of the submitters happen to be your sisters, and that you may also own some land in the immediate vicinity, or in the vicinity of the site. So what we're interested, first of all, is for you to confirm whether that's true or not, and then secondly, the key aspect of the code of conduct is impartiality. So I'm reading from the code, expert witnesses must be impartial and assist the court impartially, and they must not behave as advocates for the party who engaged them. So the party who engaged you was Ms. Kenderdine, and so that's the first aspect. I'm not sure that there's any challenge as to whether you're advocating for her. But secondly, the issue of your sisters being submitters and you potentially owning land in the area is of potential concern to us. Okay, so would you like to address that first? Yep.
So I said at the beginning of my statement, I originate from Bendigo.
Yes, that's right.
And I confirmed that I've complied with the code of conduct.
Okay.
Confirmed in my evidence. My evidence is based on my qualifications, which there's seemed to be some question, which included geology and other exercise qualifications in degrees, civil degrees.
Yes.
My expert knowledge, so I've got my qualifications, my expert knowledge, and my many years of landscape assessment experience around the country, including in Central Otago. My evidence is not influenced by my land ownership or by my sisters. And I can assure you of that.
I'm thinking so far as that we get a list of projects.
I'll just
Sorry.
That's right. So can you just let us know where your property is in relation to this site? Yeah, you just I don't know if we've got a map that covers the area wide enough. There's this map here that Mr. Baxter provided. I wonder if you can show us on that. Oh, is there? There's a viewpoint from.
On the presentation K5.
K5, yep.
That land to the right, behind all the plantings, on the right, that goes down the river.
Yes.
That's my land there.
So behind those big, what are they, poplars or something like that? Yeah. Okay.
There's all native divaricating planting.
So do you have a house there, or just a vacant, just a piece of land?
A little guy grazes it.
Right, and we can. It's behind the trees. Can you see the site or the position of the building platforms?
Been checked.
Okay.
Because it's not part of
All right.
what this is about.
And how large is your property? How many hectares?
4.
4 hectares, okay. All right, so that's the first thing. So you do own some property across the road, and your sisters have lodged submissions opposing this application, is that right? Okay,
Yes.
all right.
Yes.
And so you confirmed that you've been accepted as a landscape witness. I don't think there's any doubt about your qualifications as a landscape witness, but yes, that's right. Yes, but I think the applicant might have been asserting that you were straying into other areas that you weren't quite. I don't think your credentials as a landscape witness have been challenged. I think it's more to do with other disciplines that you.
Questions such as geology.
Yes, that's right.
So when I did my natural science degree, my first degree included geology and that, and then my masters at Lincoln for further earth sciences.
Okay.
In that. Well, and since that work, that's when I developed the method to apply to New Zealand for land typing, which is geomorphically based. It's the typology of lands and waters. Yes. That is timeless. That is not about what's on top.
So it's the interrelationship with the geomorphology and the landscape.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that technique, and applied that technique in my master's thesis on acceptable vegetation change in high country, and that land typing was this year given award of excellence by our profession.
Okay.
I had to go to Parliament to receive an award in June.
Okay.
For that work that is now digital.
All right. And I was also just interested to know where your client lives, or did your client own some land in this area or live?
Yes. The Kenderdine family have land up Murray Point Road.
Murray Point Road, okay.
And she lives in Wellington.
Right, that's right.
She wanted to be here, but it complicates.
So they own land in Murray Point Road, okay. And roughly how far from the site? I mean, it's not that important, but I'm just interested in how far away in the valley. Okay. Yes, okay. Okay, and then just to complete my question of you on that, have you discussed the submissions have you discussed this application with your sisters at all at any stage?
Minimally, yeah.
Okay. You're certainly aware of their opposition to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
They saw one sister, the Lillian Jill, she saw my evidence online.
Right. Okay.
She said she thought it was good.
Okay.
That was
all I can really say, I think it is a matter that panel has to come to a decision on in terms of what weight to apply to evidence, because of potential conflicts, you might say, and we don't want to make a decision on that right now, because you've gone to the trouble of preparing a fairly detailed statement, and what we'll do is we'll allow you to present that to us, but the applicant might address this further in their right of reply, so we'll have to consider this further. Yeah.
Central Christchurch.
Yeah.
Own property there, the studio in the apartment, and I've been involved for many decades. I've lived there 33 years, and I've been involved in cases close by.
Yes.
In environment courts and various things right in that vicinity.
Yeah.
And
okay.
I mean, there's no conflict. I'm involved in landscapes all over the country.
Yeah, understand that. I suppose it's more of a perception thing, but we certainly have to consider that point, because there is a code of conduct, and the key things are impartiality and advocacy, and the main one here seems to be impartiality. So we need to consider.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah. And by saying about my sister saying last week she'd seen evidence, but that's the first one.
All right. Well, look, I won't take any further at this. I won't take any further at this stage, but we'll go to your statement now, and we've read that, and I personally found it quite an interesting read, to be honest. But we have got some questions, and we and we welcome you to go through it, and don't expect you to read it word for word necessarily, but we'll welcome your presentation of it. Yeah,
Right, I haven't made a summary or anything like that.
that's okay. Have you got, I see you've got some written notes there. Are you prepared? Are you going to go through those? If you do that, can you just table those at the end of the process so we can have those on the record? Okay.
Chairman, can I just say that as an expert, my role is very different than a decision-making one.
Yes, okay. I understand that. Yes. All right.
I have been commissioned.
All right. Understand that. Thank you. Right. Well,
I would like to make some corrections. But again, it's where there's just some wee tweaks, if you don't mind.
sure. Yeah.
So in para, there's emails. Oh, I wish you see, it was really a tiny tweak. Para 30, the first time I understand that in terms of building location.
Oh, yeah. Got it. Yes.
And paragraph 19,
Mhm.
in the last line, can I insert in his and my analyses?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thanks. Right. Yes, got that.
In, on page 9, paragraph 53, there I describe under the associative attributes, I describe the communities that used to live at Rocky Point. I mean, I've just done a brief sentence.
Yes.
I would just do a sort of edit here to make it more comprehensive. So the second last line in 53, put a full stop after community.
Yes. Yeah.
And before, and then insert many cultures were resident with a flag out in front.
I see.
So on. So many cultures were resident.
Yes. That's right.
And that is Dr. Lloyd Carpenter, as I put at the bottom.
Yeah.
And he's the history expert on Bendigo. He did 25 years research on Bendigo history and 3.5 years of my PhD, and he's currently writing a book.
Yeah.
But he is quoting the Norwegian miner Charles Lawson, who said that in 1882.
All right. Got that.
I mentioned in that paragraph as well the small scale alluvial mining. And so there were small dams as part of that.
Yes. Okay.
And they were for the alluvial mining, but there were also small dams for fish farms, because the Chinese, as happened right around the Chinese terrace, right around Bendigo, there were fish farms supplying fish to the mining community.
Okay.
And so there were small dams there for fish farms,
Okay.
as well as their gardens and chooks and gardens. And I understand that the small dams that were there for the alluvial mining and for fish farms, they were very different to what occurred in other mining in Central Otago generally, because these were individual miners working here at Rocky Point, so they have a little dam. And these these heritage features are now very rare in Otago. There's very few left,
Okay,
apparently,
right,
according to Dr. Carpenter.
right.
I mentioned next paragraph of punt. So there was a punt right there. There's a hotel, and, you know, it really was the hub of the whole valley. That, when the punt there, could put a 6-horse carriage on it. I mean, it's quite sizable, isn't it? So it was quite a highway. So it really was the main route and the gathering point for the community where they're coming from the Whakatipu,
Okay,
from the Manitoto, from Mackenzie. That rocky point was the gathering point. I mentioned at paragraph 61 the indoor light issue, which I quite consider when I know a few years ago I did some measuring and saw that you could see the indoor lights for 5 kilometres, you know, that incredibly visible in that clear valley.
yeah. Sorry, Ms. Blythe, I just need to understand, have you gone through your correction? Is that all correct? Oh, so maybe if you just do that first and then we can start looking at the details. Yeah, okay.
Um, at page 12 on the footer, you would have seen I have a typo. Not 2028, it's 2017.
17,
Pierce's work
okay, thank you.
on the 4-page spine. And then on page 15, paragraph 89.
Yep.
At the end of that paragraph, delete of the DA.
Right.
And add a landscape value effect skewed by the DA, controlled and discretionary provisions.
Controlled and discretionary.
So that they are the cue.
Yeah.
To that landscape, landscape value and effect. It was cued by the.
That's
by the
CU,
control and
yes.
discretionary.
that's CUED, queued.
CUED.
Okay, right, okay.
It's not
Not the other one, okay, all right.
Thank you.
That's all good, thank you.
And then down in paragraph 92, delete, on the end of the third line, breach the development area threshold and just delete that.
Right,
And that's adversely affect.
Yeah.
Spelling.
that's right,
And then the last line, character, full stop.
full stop.
Yes.
Yep, got it.
The cued by the DA provisions,
Right,
I assess the would have high adverse landscape effects.
right.
So in terms of explanation, I won't say much except as you can see, I've referenced the fire risk, the wildfire risk. I think there is
Yes.
an ever increasing risk on this site. And as we know, and there's those papers I've referenced, will show you, fires are not necessarily uphill, as the expert for the developer says.
Yes.
Like the Portals fire, the downhill,
Yeah.
major downhill fire. And some of these species that are proposed to replace, there will be at least moderate flammability.
Right.
Some species proposed to replace carnica. And what I hadn't realised until I got those new conditions yesterday was the 30-metre clearance required, because the rules, the controls have been very vague. And Mr. Baxter's assessment has been very unhelpful in not factoring in adequate setbacks to address wildfire risk, and nor has there been recognition of the risk to the whole landscape. The provisions that have been included with sprinklers and so on to address uphill fire to private property are very localised. They're not addressing the bigger picture and the important Kānuka landscape. And the new provision seems to be a 30-metre. It's a 30 metres clear.
I think
So, in my opinion, the provisions don't adequately address the natural processes that wildfire is and is increasingly likely on this site. It is widely known in New Zealand, way more than 90% of wildfires are human instigated, and having more people present, and including people who are visitors and unfamiliar with flammability and risk, toss the old butt around and all this sort of thing. That is a high risk for this class. And so I agree there should be setbacks from buildings, 30 metres proposed. But that needs to be factored into the assessment, and it currently isn't.
into the assessment of landscape or into
Yes.
yeah, okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's understood. Thanks for that. That's the wildfire issue. Yeah.
So, as I've stated, I have not considered vegetation mitigation as a landscape mitigation method.
Thank you.
It is a very special landscape. It's interesting. You know, I was always interested that the plan addressed it separately as an O&L. And I think that's really important, and it's great that it goes from that summit right down to the flats, that includes that link, which is, you know, a good landscape link. And so that's why I'm thinking, you know, I am concerned about that proposal for the group on Bendigo Road, lots 27 to 30, and I disagree with my colleague on that assessment. And so those are in the O&L and would have significant adverse effects. And what I totally agree that there's potential for development within the development area. I think that's an interesting opportunity, but I don't think what's proposed is meets that need. The lots 1 to 10, as Mr. Baxter agrees, will be a very evident group from that's on Lake Dunstan, really. And that up there within the development area will be signaling that. And the Lake Dunstan waters, you know, very well used, very much enjoyed. People lying around in their kayaks and the lilos and the boats and, you know, fishing and that. And it's a much enjoyed for that whole natural landscape. And so that group 1 to 10, that is significant.
So I might ask you questions as we go, if that's okay. So that lots 1 to 10, yeah, that's okay. Either all of them or some of them are in the development area, aren't they? Some within the
They're all in the development.
but they're all in the development area. Okay, so
And,
yeah.
Mr. Baxter only mentions the 1 to 10 being, you know, I know that I can't remember the word he used, but you know, that would be a substantial, evident development.
Right.
When you look at those behind there, 12, 13, and 14, there's just a few kilometres between, and you can see the lake. You can peek through and see the lake from those sides too. So the kilometre will go. And so it's not just dark coloured buildings, you know, good overhang over windows. That helps a lot. But the nighttime from that big cluster of stuff will be.
So I'll ask you a question on that too, because we did ask Mr. Baxter to comment on his volunteered 60% glazing limitation, and it appeared to be quite, just as a layperson, it appeared to me to be quite a high allowance, but his evidence was that it's actually quite restrictive in relation to other buildings in the district. Have you got any comment on that?
I'd say that it allows a lot of glazing.
Right.
Okay. I was surprised too. So if we look at the provision that the proposed design controls and the glazing, that's on actually page 19. So those have got 1 to 10 have got 60% of any 3 metre high elevation. So 60%, that just means that your bottom metre doesn't need to be glazed, but everything else, 100%. Right round.
Yeah, that's how I understood it, and I think those provisions have been tweaked. They might change, but I think the 60% would stay as a proposal. So this is the new one, but I think after questioning yesterday, the applicant's potentially revising the 3 metre high elevation, which was a bit hard to interpret. But I think that, yeah, that's what they're working on.
In my opinion, some of these would also be visible from that view.
Right.
They're around 50% of the total external wall area across all the elevations combined. So that whole west face can be 100% glazed.
Yes, that's right. I did raise that with the applicant, so I'm aware of your concern. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and because located up on that plateau, on my cover image, you see that plateau. So they're going to be up there on that open plateau. And they are going to be highly evident and reduce natural landscape, natural character, the whole perceptual, the physical, biophysical, and the associative relationship with that place. And you can see that that's, big cushion field country. It's that mosaic. That's an important part of that landscape.
Can I ask you another question on that? It's possibly a planning question, but I think you've had enough questions on planning matters. But do you see the conflict or the inherent dilemma that there is potentially between the provisions that allow for development of, say, lots 1 to 10 in that area as a controlled activity, provided visibility of the lake is somehow addressed? Would you go so far as to accept the proposition that some development is envisaged in that plateau area, which is in fact visible from the lake?
No, I don't.
You don't? Okay.
Difficult there.
No. Okay.
Probably read it when the cruise came out.
Right. Okay.
I always thought, well, that's got it. You won't go to build on there because of that view thing that triggers the control, and again, it just triggers on the discretionary. So I've always understood that.
So you see it more of as a sort of a building ban area rather than a mitigate. You can build provided you mitigate in some way by planting or design or softening. Do you see it more as a sort of an area you shouldn't build on?
An area shouldn't.
That's how you see it. Okay.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. No, well, that's fine. That makes it clear what your opinion is on that anyway. So thank you for that. Are there any other matters you want to take us to in your evidence? We've probably got some questions anyway, but feel free to go to anything in particular.
Mr. Brown, in his summary, he said that I recognise that the anticipated development in that development area would change things visually, but I hadn't stated that. Yeah.
So where have you? Sorry, what part of the evidence is that in, or was that just
Mr. Brown's summary is the
summary,
that that is para 12.
para 12? Okay.
He was saying that. So I'm saying that it could be designed very differently and not have those effects.
Okay. It could be designed differently and not have those.
Yeah.
And not have those impacts. Okay. Right. Thank you.
So my comment that those front lots.
Yeah. Four down the bottom.
First
Yeah.
group, you see it in Mr. Baxter's plans for catchment E.
Right.
So, like, lots 1, 2 and 3, the curvilege is slope 20 metres.
Oh, yep.
And what's going to happen, that's going to have all the barbecues and the sheds and all the stuff on it.
Yeah.
And there's not a hint of how that, I just find that these things have not been addressed. I know there's a building consent process,
yeah,
but there is no guidance. The design controls are silent on this.
Do you mean how the curtilage area might be developed within that footprint for curtilage type things is not controlled?
Just the building, because these are on the edge,
I see.
right out there,
Okay.
very prominent location.
Right. So your concern is that the next consenting phase will focus on the buildings and not what happens on the curtilage. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the answer to that is. We might be told.
Continue.
Right. Okay.
And a good beach. Yeah.
I mean, it seems that any building there would be a controlled activity at the very least. So that would potentially give the council officers the scope to question that. But what happens after the process, I'm not sure. Yeah. Okay, that's your concern.
It's all visible.
All right.
So it's not just the buildings.
All right.
The
Yep,
privilege.
Yep.
It's a white copy, armchairs and whatever it is.
Okay. All right.
If you'd like, so I can make another comment on design control.
Yeah, if you like, and as I say, we have got some questions that we can
Right.
put to you in general. So, but if you want to talk about design controls now, that's fine.
Just
Yeah.
thinking about that, and there's a rule about, control about exterior lighting have to be
Yeah.
maximum of 1.2 metres from ground level. From the ground.
Yes, that's right.
level.
Yes. Yes.
So therefore, if you step up onto your deck, which, could be big areas, if you've got areas you can have 2.5 metres, and these verandas and decks, 2.5 metres from each side, so you've got 5 metre plus
Mm.
roofing on outdoor space. If you stepped up there, your light's 1.2 metres from ground level, how practical is that?
So you're concerned about the slope of the land would mean that the 1.2 metres doesn't provide enough.
Is it practical
Right.
to have lighting so low and shielded when you need to be able to do your barbecue and all that stuff, but the lights are way down and shielded?
Okay.
And I just think some of the stuff's not practical.
So that's probably not a new control, is it? The shrouding, or at least minimising the height of exterior lighting. In your experience, what would you recommend something that would work?
One thing is to, or when it's out,
Yeah.
the driveway entrance or something.
Yeah.
But this one, there's nothing that says there's indoor lighting and there's exterior lighting. And what I'm unclear how practical what is intended for these indoor outdoor spaces.
I see. All right. Thank you.
Because they could be, to be practical, they could be, I don't know, lit space.
Yeah, I understand your concern.
Yeah,
Okay.
thank you.
Thank you.
So, if you wanted to talk to them about controls and You were saying in my statement that the critical, I colleague, of addressing only a superficial vision approach and not addressing the natural landscape in terms of its biodegrade, abiotic dimensions, largely, and all its associated values.
Yes, that's right. Understand that. Would you like us to ask you some questions? Yeah, are you ready for us to ask you some questions now? Okay, very good.
Paragraph 69, you quote Mr. Baxter, that Finnica will be retained as a predominant tree species in order to maintain the existing landscape character and avoid any reduction in the existing vegetative cover that forms a significant part of the landscape character of the site. You state, whilst this is a commendable aspiration, it's likely to be impractical and unsustainable. Why?
Because it's impractical in that clearance will be required, as is now recognised in the proposed methods for wildfire setbacks. There will be increasing wildfire risk, and so whilst it can be asked about fire breaks, no proposed, and that is because the focus is on the buildings and they've got meters. The conditions stay where permitted by fire management. And I understand, looking at the latest conditions, that fire management plans, not plural, they will have to be implemented by the owners, and they likely change to the time as wildfire risk increases. Is what the experts anticipate.
So you anticipate a fairly high degree of clear fire around residents.
It's going to really be, what was the requirement of the removed around residences? And then what typically occurs is some people get really nervous and will encourage things to buy and remove them. And another concern I have is that because there'll be a lot of, casual people staying there, hospitality, that won't have the awareness and the sensitivity, and that would be expected to increase the risk.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Lix. I've got a couple of questions myself, and then I'll come back and see if there are any other ones from the panel. Just in relation to the 4 lots at the bottom of the hill, down closer to your property, I guess. Those initially it was proposed there'd be 3 there, and now the proposal is for 4 lots there, smaller curtilage areas and some planting. Sorry, that's the wrong word. It's not screen planting. It's more amenity planting proposed in front of.
Make them look a group.
That's right. Yes.
Integrate them. I understand from Mr.
Right.
Baxter's statement.
And so, in your evidence, you've expressed concern about that because the stables complex, with its very large poplars and trees, it has got a distinctive character, hasn't it? And were you concerned at the different character of these buildings and the location, or can you just sort of tell us a little bit more about your concern about those 4?
No, I wasn't concerned about how they link with the poplars and the stuff.
No, okay.
I'm concerned that this is the O&L, goes right down to the
Yes, it does. Yeah.
to Indigo Loop Road,
Yep.
which is, was pretty amazing thinking for that time. It was really impressive that they did that and recognised that connection. And so that whole geomorphological sequence is connected, and that is commendable in the O&L mapping.
Right.
And so to put a cluster, a group, a node of residential / commercial, if it would significantly disrupt the legibility of that natural landscape connection with those lands from the valley lands to the mountain lands. Yeah, and that's what cluttering the natural
Thanks for
landforms.
thanks for clarifying your concern on those. Do you see those? Yeah. Right.
One sheet. Yeah.
So your concern is in relation to the O&L and the continuous nature of the integrity of the O&L.
The integrity of the O&L.
Not so much the character along the highway. Is that?
The character on the highway, yes, because the O&L is such a feature for the highway corridor.
Yes.
And that the fact that it comes right down is an important feature.
And we've gone to some pains to try and understand the genesis of this O&L and how it was developed, and Mr. Baxter had some involvement himself in that. But did you have any involvement yourself?
Remember?
Okay. Because what I'm interested in, we may never know the answer, but I was interested to know whether it was a deliberate decision of whoever crafted it and approved it to take it down to the down to the, right down to the bottom, and
Yeah, he was the botanist.
I suppose we'll, yeah, well, all we can really go on is that's where it is, and you know, it would have been useful to know what thinking went into it and all of that, but what we've got in front of us is an O&L, and it's got a clearly defined boundary, isn't it? So, well, I suppose it has got status because it's in the district plan, so that's where the starting point. Okay, well, look, that's useful discussion on those 4 lots. And so that is one concern of yours. The other is the lots 1 to 10. You've talked about that already, about the proximity. Just interested to get a sort of a feel from you. It's probably a slightly unfair question, but what level of development do you think would be appropriate on this development area, at least in the development area itself, bearing in mind that that's got some sort of purpose, that zone seems to have a purpose, that there will be some development in there.
Yes.
Would you agree with that? Okay.
Village.
So it could potentially be the same number of lots, but done in a different way. Is that what you're saying? Okay. All right. Thanks for that. Very good. I'll just see.
No, because since the planning of it, years ago, wildfire wasn't seen as a big risk then.
Right.
So the sort of development we do now, you have to try to make sure people can be educated or responsible.
Right. Another question I had is in your assessment, in your statement, you don't seem to have gone into the district plan objectives and policies. I know it's a planning sort of domain, if you like, but often with landscape evidence, witnesses do look into the context around the district plan, and some of the questions I've asked you about the development zone might have been relevant to that. Do you have any comment on that?
I mean, I have looked at the district plan provisions and objectives and policies that are relevant.
Okay.
The plan speaks to address the O&L.
Right. Okay.
And so I disagree with Mr. Baxter's emphasis on, you know, it merges in with stuff that's happening further along the foothills to the range down towards Cromwell, because that is not the test. This is about this area is an O&L and within an O&L. And it's not about merging with other places and Chinese terrorists or whatever.
Right. Okay.
But the wrong tests.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that. I think I've just got one more question. Yeah, it's a more technical question. In your paragraph 16, and Mr. Baxter does this too, that landscape witnesses often use a sort of an assessment rating of low, moderate, high potentially, but I often ask them to try and help us understand how that equates to the RMA sort of parlance when it comes to minor, adverse, and even significant effects. Is moderate?
It's more than minor.
It's more than minor. Okay, that was my question. Yeah. All right.
Sorry, I didn't say.
No, look, that's so it's interpreted as being more than minor. Okay.
Yes.
And Mr. Baxter's saying it's less than minor, essentially, isn't he?
Yes.
Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or minor, potentially.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I think that's all the questions I have, actually. Any further questions from the panel at this stage? Okay. Any questions of clarification? Adam? Okay. All right, Ms. Lucas, thank you for that. Thank you very much for presenting that. We went to some lengths to sort of go through the early stages about the role of, you know, the expert status and whether it's within the code. We'll have to revisit that, but it was useful to go through your evidence anyway and ask questions. So thanks for clarifying our answers on that.
Yeah, if there's a desire to go through the design controls.
Yeah.
And detail, I'm happy to
Right.
liaise with my colleague.
Right. We'll
Because I don't agree with mild steel panel cladding. We should say 14, you know, yes.
all right. We'll have to But we'll come back to you on that if we seek any conferencing in that regard, but we'll have to address the main aspects first. Thank you very much. Okay. Now we're at the point where we've heard from all of the submitters. Again, we've got some tabled letters which we'll consider later. Going to the offices now, would you like us to take an adjournment to get organised, or do you need some more time to write the responses? How long do you think? Because we're happy to take half an hour to an hour if need be. Would that be enough? Half an hour, okay. So if we take an adjournment now and reconvene at 10:30. Thank you very much. Need to reconvene. I'll reconvene the hearing. Thank you very much. Right, so we're going to hear from the officers now, and then go over to the applicant. And I've got a number of things I'll suggest to you that you take account of in the right of reply. Not exhaustive, but just some things that occur straight away. But first of all, we'll go to the officers. Thank you very much, Mr. Vincent. Are you how you've been going with your written notes? Got some here, have we? Okay, all good. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Is it a combined one, is it, or is it?
No,
Yeah. Oh, it's not. Okay. Okay. Yes. Okay. Yours is still to come. Okay. Yeah, just keep handing those out, though. It's just we may as well wait till we've got it ready.
Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yeah, very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got two. It's not as thick as I first thought. It's only. Yeah. Well, thank you very much to the officers. I know you've probably been working in the evening doing this, but it's really helpful to have it in writing because in other hearings I've done, I've been frantically trying to scribble things down, but it's really good to have in writing. So thanks. If you just start, Mr. Harding, and take us through your notes.
Well, thank you. What I should get is relatively brief, because as you say, it's been repeated since the close of the hearing yesterday.
Yes.
What I've tried to do is just to provide some further advice and some of the key ecological issues which have arisen through the hearing to try and assist the panel in its consideration of those.
Right.
I've added here a climate statement, separate to the hearing.
Yes.
And at the end of this evidence, I've just listed my qualifications and experience because they haven't been listed in the previous.
Oh, okay. Yes. Thank you for that. Thank you.
So I will read it through because it is a summary.
Yes.
So,
Yeah, read by all means.
So this statement should be read in conjunction with my earlier advice, which was and it provides summary response to evidence provided by the applicant and submitted just prior to the planning hearing, and to the issues arising from that evidence as discussed at the hearing in the last 2 days. But just to qualify that I haven't, it's not implied by blind rebuttal of that earlier evidence. I haven't had time to do that, obviously. I've just focused on some of that.
That's fine.
So the statement is necessarily brief. It was repeated in the hearing. The Commission's following will close the hearing on the 19th. And as I said, its purpose is to assist the Commission's with consideration of the ecological issues. So I'll split them into a few different. You see, the first is information requirements. The evidence of Richard Ewan's confirms my earlier concern that the plant species data provided as part of the application are inadequate. It is concerning that a relatively brief survey of only parts of the application area revealed the presence of so many additional species. And I know that Richard Ewan's credibility has not been questioned, but I have worked with Richard on several previously, and I'd just like to confirm that I have confidence in his competence and professionalism. I'm familiar with the rigour that is required to adequately survey dryland vegetation. I recently surveyed areas in Central Otago, Waipiki Valley and Mackenzie Basin for plants of one of the more cryptic genera, that's the dryland crescent species. Many of the notable plant species in dryland habitats are small, cryptic, in other words, hard to see.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Cryptic is hard to
Hard to see.
Yeah, okay,
And or ephemeral, so just present for a short time of the year.
right.
The applicant's plant species data do not give me confidence that the applicant has adequately seen that vegetation flora at the proposed development area. The applicant's response to this lack of data is that the proposed offset remains adequate, and in part because such species are abundant elsewhere in the Bendigo Hills area. I disagree. It's not possible to adequately assess or manage the potential adverse effects of activities without comprehensive and robust data. There may be other notable species or additional populations of known species that reside. In my earlier advice, I expressed concern at the lack of invertebrate data. The applicant concedes that a field survey should have been undertaken, but if it is not, appears to have made no further effort to provide invertebrate data. The applicant's response to this limitation is that the proposed effects management will improve habitat quality for invertebrates. No evidence is presented to support this assumption. The applicant's invertebrate ecologist advised that at-risk invertebrate species are likely and that the effects of the proposed activity will have permanent effects on invertebrate faunas. It cannot be assumed that the proposed activity will not have significant adverse effects on invertebrate fauna, or to adequately manage those effects, when it is not known the species present at the site.
Right, we'll just, if you don't mind, we'll just ask you some questions
Sure.
as we go, and it won't be a rigorous examination, but just in relation to that first point, information requirements. You would have heard we asked a number of questions of the witnesses yesterday from Doc to try and get a feel for how much work that might entail, and we were given some answers about, you know, days and maybe a couple of weeks, might summarise it, to do the surveys, including the archaeological work, which is not your area. But do you have you got any thoughts on whether those answers were about right, or in your experience, in terms of how much work is required to do that work?
Yeah, if I recall, I think the Tribune suggested about 2 days work for a vegetation survey.
Yes, that's less than what I said.
Yeah, it's a relatively small area, and I concur that would be sufficient. But an important qualifier is that the ecologist or botanist doing the work has to be familiar with dryland ecosystems.
Yeah,
it is quite a specialised vegetation type, and the flora is difficult to both see and identify. And it's also seasonal. You do need to be there at the right time of the year. So while the actual time required to survey may not be very long, it has to be done with sufficient expertise and at the right time to adequately identify all the species that may be present.
All right.
I can't comment on the vertical surveys. It's outside my area of expertise.
Okay. All right. No, thank you for that.
Supplementary to that one. The business of spring flowering and the difference between various seasons that's environmental impact, like
That's
a wet spring as opposed to a dry spring.
a natural environmental variation.
Yeah.
So,
Yes,
so again, you may strike a season where you have very poor presence of those springing species, and alternatively, you may strike, as it's been suggested, maybe in the situation this year, a wet season where they are more common and prominent than other places. I guess the interesting thing about the site and about the dryland ecosystems is they're very dynamic. And there's a lot of change occurring naturally at these sites. And that's one of the changes which you expect to occur, which is a challenge for making assessments. I've said that.
And part of that, the dynamic of that site is also the regrowth of Canoga, because it's a question I put yesterday, I think it was, about being a sanctuary for the seed germination point. Yeah.
Yes, so I addressed that to some extent further on.
Oh, okay.
But, yeah, correct. Yeah.
I'm learning off my learned colleague here who asked questions in advance of the material. Yes.
So that's right. No, it's important, the information requirements, but that question was quite useful, I thought, because the 2 days or whatever it might be, it may not take into account seasonality and those sorts of things. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, it is a problem with these sites, and it frequently does occur. The site will be visited and assessed.
Yeah.
And, it may not actually be effective simply because of
Right.
things outside the surveyor's control.
Yeah.
I'm also conscious, even though I'm not an invertebrate ecologist, that invertebrate surveys and 84 surveys are very similar, often willing to do the native series of signals.
Yeah.
And the conditions are right to actually adequately detect the full suite of species within those locations.
Thanks for that. That helps us understand that. So thank you very much. We'll let you go on to the SNA part of it now.
Yes, so moving to SNAs, the application here supports significant indigenous vegetation and significant habitats of indigenous fauna. It is an SNA, though not scheduled as such in the Central District Plan. And by that I mean it's an SNA in terms of its ecological values. I accept it doesn't meet the definition of SNA under the NPK. I'm unaware of any contrary view presented here.
Sorry, I just need to explore that with you. When you say it doesn't meet the definition of SNA, do you mean it's not mapped, or is it?
It's not that. So,
Yeah.
I guess just I'm just qualifying what I'm stating there, that if you read the MPSOB, an SNA is only, the definition of SNA is one that's mapped, that's not the district plan.
Okay.
But in terms of its ecological values, that means this is that's
Right.
true.
Okay, that's clear. Okay, thanks.
SNAs are areas, not just species or vegetation types. The assessment of the effects of an activity on an SNA should be on the effects on the area, not just on the individual components, such as crushing fields and planted forest.
Right.
Adverse effects on an SNA of any new subdivision use, actually board necessary, use
Okay.
for development, that must be avoided and include, and these are drawn from the NPSOB. Loss of ecosystem representation and extent, disruption to sequences, mosaics, or ecosystem function, fragmentation, and reduction in the population size or occupancy of threatened or at-risk decline in the species. The area is not a listed SNA. Nevertheless, the adverse effects which must be avoided are, in my view, relevant to application of the effects management hierarchy as is required for indigenous biodiversity outside SNAs. The applicant's assessment of the ecological effects does not adequately consider the effects listed above. The EIANZ guidelines are inadequate for such an assessment. I note that the applicant states that they're widely used and implies that they're widely accepted as a method. I'd just like to make the point that they aren't endorsed, they're not through documents, so they're not they have no legal weight as an assessment method, and they've not been endorsed at all by the Environment Court either. There's been situations where ecologists have agreed on the assessments undertaken by the guidelines, and the court has decided accordingly. But in the Environment Court cases or Commissioner hearing cases which I've been involved with where they've been questioned, the decision has always expressed reservations or doubt about the adequacy of the guidelines. So they're not specifically designed for RMA assessments, and they have limitations for that purpose. And particularly when you're looking at this ecological process or ecological function effects. So I'm just making that point to say that the right applicant has probably applied them quite adequately and competently. They do not provide a complete assessment of effects, in my view.
But yeah, so just to finish that off, I asked Mr. Beale a number of questions on that, and what he said was, regardless of which method is used, he accepts that the values on this side is as high as you can get. And and I asked Council Bill, getting names at the stage, to, whether it's critical to the panel to determine which are the correct guidelines to use when their witness in any event has said that it's as high as you can get with the category. So, so my questions of you are, is there another way to do it? Or what is another recognised way? And does it really matter for us, do you think?
Well, there isn't a standard recognised way.
Right, okay.
But it does matter in the sense that they may be adequate to assess and value the loss of individual components of the
Right.
ecosystem or site. But
Yes.
when you're designing something such as an offset from, they don't take into consideration the things like reorientation or ecological processes. And perhaps just by way of example, the offset that's proposed will be a piece of planted vegetation, which will be much like what you would see at other planting sites. It will lack those naturally occurring, evolving ecological processes which occur when vegetation develops and evolves naturally outside. It's very difficult to replicate that. So when the guidelines are used to design an offset, that is a limitation of them.
I see. So the offset is fragmented from the original.
Well, it doesn't compensate for the offset, the effects of fragmenting a piece of naturally occurring indigenous vegetation or habitat.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you. Thank you for that.
The applicant's response to my earlier advice does not alter my view that effects such as ecosystem loss, fragmentation, and reduction of threatened at-risk species have not been adequately assessed, let alone avoided competition. Moving to threatened at-risk species, the application area and the wider ecosystem within which the area is located support populations of threatened and at-risk plant and animal species. Evidence has been presented that the notable species and vegetation within the application area are widespread and relatively common elsewhere within the Bendigo area and or within the Duxton ecological district. The applicant implies, therefore, that the loss of such notable species from the application areas is insignificant or minor because these species are a widespread component of vegetation across the district. Threatened and at-risk species are assessed and listed through the national classification system. And I just like to reference I've used the I didn't have time to update that. There is a more recent threat classification manual. Those species that meet the assessment criteria are nationally threatened or nationally at risk. The abundance of those species and locality or within a region does not reduce or minimise their threat status. It is typical that some threatened or at-risk species are common at certain locations, as they are often confined to specific habitats of root systems. The notable species present at the application area are no exception. They are typical of dryland and saline soda ecosystems, such as those present at the application area. These dryland ecosystems are a feature of the Duxton ecological district, which is a national stronghold for some of these dryland species, notably spring annual species. The loss of populations of these notable dryland species from the application area would have adverse effects on the national populations of these species listed as species with or at risk of extinction. It is not appropriate to assess these adverse effects in just the regional or local context. It's a common assessment to make because it's easy to go to a place, so it's the species is abundant, yes, so therefore shouldn't be too concerned about it. But the whole point of the national system is they take all this stuff into consideration and they classify species to say there's a set of criteria to determine the threat or to the extent to which a species is threatened with or at risk of extinction. And all those factors are taken into account. It could be, for example, you might go into a Calving forest in North, it's now of a common ecosystem, but of course it's only present really in the northern half of the North Island. So the fact that spring annuals are common down here, they're absent from most of the rest of the country. But this is their stronghold. It doesn't mean they're less important because they're common here. It's a national classification system.
Well, I think that's what Mr. Ewens was giving in the evidence yesterday. Is that the point he was making? Yeah. All right.
So moving to the biodiversity offset. I've tried to address the issue that wasn't quite a big area, so I hope I've covered most of it. But the applicant's offsetting proposal is based on the presumption that recreation of a climax plant community is appropriate to offset the loss of naturally occurring indigenous vegetation in the application area. This proposal raises several issues. First, there is considerable uncertainty about what a climax plant community would comprise at this location. The applicant's assessment makes several assumptions, albeit well informed, about the character of the climax plant community at this location. However, they remain assumptions based on incomplete data and on a presumption that a climax community would persist in today's environment. It is highly likely that risks associated with a rapidly warming climate, such as increased intensity and frequency of fire and storm events, and increased human settlement in the wider area, mean that the climax community that may have once been present is no longer likely to occur. Second, establishing and maintaining species plantings at this drought-prone location will be very challenging. In addition to the landscape scale threats identified above, it will be a challenge to maintain watering systems, protect plants from herbivores, and release plants from competition. Successful establishment of plants will likely take a long time, considerable effort, and substantial expense. There is no certainty that it will be successful. Third, establishment of a predetermined climax plant community will not replicate the species and plant communities that will be lost in at the application area. The offset plantings will not be like for like, as is required as a principle of biodiversity offset. That is, it will not comprise the same ecosystems, vegetation, habitats, and species as those that will be lost at the application area. Fourth, the contention that the establishment of an area of climax vegetation will provide a benefit or net gain for indigenous conservation is misplaced. The ecological value of the application area and surrounding ecosystem is the mosaic of dryland plant communities, principally pushing towards character, and the notable plant and animal species they support. The proposed climate vegetation is not reflective, typical, or characteristic of the present day indigenous biodiversity in the ecological district. Fifth, there is a high risk the offset plantings will displace, in other words, remove, the indigenous vegetation that is ecologically significant, thereby creating further adverse effects for which no effects management is proposed. Any assurance that the ecologically significant vegetation and threatening at-risk species will be avoided is not credible, given the applicant's failure to adequately survey and identify ecological values at the application area.
Before we go on, can you give me a definition of climax?
Climax means that in the prevailing conditions at the site, it would be the plant community that would prevail, that would be unchanged. So, like say, for example, if you take a typical situation, say beech forest, and it's cleared, you'll have a succession going through probably bracken and ferns and shrubs, and then reasonably some more cover shrub will colonise there and then beech. Or you might get a wind throw in the beech forest, or the beech forest trees fall over, and you've got a flush of beech seed. When they reach the mature forest canopy, we go to the climax community. So it's the climax of the successional process, is in broad terms what it means. And it will be different for different communities.
Thanks. So you're up to 23.
Sorry. The ultimate proposal is based on inadequate data, a misplaced objective of creating climax vegetation, and a misinterpretation of the ecological character and functioning of dryland systems at this location. Disturbance, notably by wildfire, is a natural phenomenon at this location. Inland parts of the South Island, east of the main divide, experienced occasional wildfire prior to human settlement. The frequency and extent of burning increased following human settlement. It is likely that dryland ecosystems in Central Otago never or only rarely achieved a climax state. They were more usually dynamic, constantly changing, with successional mosaics maintained by the best disturbers, such as they are today in Western Australia. The mosaic of plant communities at the location is typical of the characteristic of the ecological district. They are representative of the naturally occurring vegetation at this location. A key assessment principle of the NSIP is that significant indigenous vegetation has ecological integrity, typical of the indigenous vegetation of the ecological district in the present day environment. So, and it's often an issue. There's often a presumption when sites are surveyed that they are of higher value if they are representative of some former state, and it's a bit of a throwback from the Reserves Act. So the Reserves Act required protection of a representative range of regional ecosystems, and that's what's guided things like the Protected Natural Areas Program, and guided a lot of the priority setting for setting aside protected areas by the Department of Conservation. The RMA doesn't contain that provision. The RMA requires protecting indigenous biodiversity. And the NPSIB has been quite helpful in clarifying that it does mean present day indigenous biodiversity. It doesn't mean some former state or some future state. It means what's present now, because adequate protection of indigenous biodiversity is not just what was originally there. And that also is a bit problematic because times change. We'll never replace what was originally there. Conditions are different now. So it's about present day indigenous biodiversity. The support of other ecologists for restoring original vegetation in these sites cited by Andrew Wells in the summary statement is misleading. And this is the issue we discussed yesterday. The Southern Wind Farm expert compensation sites was for offsetting and compensation. Further, the site referred to by the experts in the quoted paragraph is very different ecologically from the Rocky Point site. It is tall cloud forest. Well, actually, it's a high plateau, a high rainfall area where the original forest, which was a mosaic of vegetation now, actually, it was the original forest was cedar, which is high altitude cold climate substrate species. And the discussion of this expert conference is the value of enabling that to succeed for succession to occur to reach period see the forest. It's a location where wildfire is not an issue. It's not, it's wet. It's quite different from the ecological conditions here. So it can't really be used as a legitimate comparison. As I said, natural disturbances such as drought and fire are not important if that's out. So.
Okay, so a couple of questions. Just on, you said it was for offsetting and compensation. Just explain to us why that's important, that it's both.
Well, the reference to Andrew Wells, I mean, the application is for offsetting, and Andrew Wells has used this example to support the appropriateness of trying to establish a finance community as an offset for the effects of the utility.
Yeah, but
and the discussion at the expert conference was not about the offsetting of that for that application is actually recreationist and lowland red tussock communities. It was accepted that replacement of the forest on this plateau was actually a compensation action, not an offsetting action.
right.
So it's just that it can't be used as a legitimate comparison to experts agreeing to an offsetting outcome that was actually compensation, not offsetting.
So they're quite different in your view. Okay. And just a couple of other questions, if you don't mind. In paragraph 19, you talk about how difficult it would be, very challenging to establish and maintain species plantings. Are you talking there about the proposal, which is the different type of vegetation, or is that comment that would also apply to the like for like? I think I asked Mr. Ewens about that yesterday. He said it would be very hard, if not impossible, to do like for like. Is that your experience?
So my comment here is with respect to what's being proposed.
What's being proposed? Yes.
But just with respect to like for like,
yeah.
I concur with Mr. Ewens. I think it'd be very, very difficult.
Oh.
And I've worked involved in ecosystems for some time, and I think the best way to provide like for like or net gain, well, probably the only way would be to take an area that's already been developed.
Yeah.
Put a grader plate over it, return it back to a stony surface,
Yeah.
and let nature take its course.
Right.
And as the applicants acknowledged, and ecologists agree, a lot of the cushion field that's present in this area is a result of past land use change and effects. You know, so you've got an area that's been degraded, and these are the species that are competitive in those open, dry sites.
Right.
And so if you recreate the substrate and conditions which replicate those conditions, you would probably get the community naturally occurring. But it wouldn't be a net gain unless you were actually doing it on site, which would be redeveloped.
Not a net gain, that's the key point there. Okay, and just finally, in your paragraph 21, can you make comment on the transition, the fact that the like for like would replicate well, if it was successful, would ultimately transition into another type of vegetation anyway? Is that a comment? Have you got any comment on that? I think you have in your evidence, but
Yeah, so what's happening at the site, the ecosystem dynamic. It's what you've got degradation, whether originally it was by natural disturbance or more recently now by human disturbance.
Yeah.
And what we're having is a suite of indigenous species which are able to colonise and grow and adapt or survive in that environment. And there's a progression to woody vegetation.
yes,
That's typical, and it's typical for most parts of the country, of course. But the difference here in the east and south island intermontane basins is the dryness, the driest part of the country, and also there's always the risk. There always has been dry, and in fact, the charcoal records, if you go back, I've referenced it here, and look at the paleontological data, and the analyses that have been done showing these periodic, several thousand years apart burn events, which are probably not as widespread as some of the burning, well, they won't be as widespread as some of the burning that occurred in humans, but they're lightning strike fires, which will burn and return that whole succession back to square one. And then you have, and the succession will vary in soil depth, and stoniness, aspect, and altitude, and the whole range of factors. So you get some of that. And that's very well illustrated in the dust and ecological district. So that's the challenge of trying to, I guess, protect and maintain Indigenous biodiversity in these sites. It's not a sex state, and well, it's not a sex state anywhere in the country, to be fair, but these are the most dynamic parts of the country to try and achieve that. They're very challenging. Yeah.
that's right. I'm just trying to understand the applicant's point that what is, putting it bluntly, what's the point of trying to replicate something that's in transition anyway?
Yeah.
And I think you have addressed it in your evidence, but you haven't made a comment in here. But can you encapsulate apart from this, the points you've made about whether it's appropriate to have climax species anyway? What's wrong in concept with allowing for the transitionary phase and jumping a bit ahead on the schedule, so to speak? What's the problem with that?
You mean with respect to the planting theory about proposing?
Yeah, well, with the offset planting being a climax community.
Well, I think there's a lot of uncertainty really whether that will even be the climax.
Oh, yeah, you've made that point.
Yeah, I think that's probably
the key point. Okay.
And there's huge risk of being able to achieve that, whether it's achievable.
Right.
And then secondly, it doesn't maintain Indigenous biodiversity. It's a net loss. You're losing the characteristics of the site. I think we're letting something else, which isn't the same as what.
Yeah.
So
Understood.
I think if you were to try and, I guess, compensate for this activity, you would do what I suggested earlier. You would take some developed land somewhere.
Yeah.
And you would return it to a degraded state and allow natural succession to take its course. You may manage that, you may control.
Yeah.
This, for example.
And you're not suggesting that, are you?
Well, that's not for me to suggest.
No.
But we're just saying in terms of having no levels of Indigenous biodiversity, that's really what anything to do.
Right.
But the problem with that, of course, is it's a lag. It will take a long time to establish that.
Right.
Meanwhile, the loss is occurring now. So you have a difficulty there, and that you've got a temporal problem as well. It's maintaining Indigenous biodiversity.
Understood. Thank you very much for that full answer. Right, and we'll let you move on to the next topic. Protection of the wider area 27.
Okay. The applicant proposed improved protection management of Indigenous biodiversity values on other parts of the site. Evidence presented at the hearing is that those other parts of the property are already protected by conservation government, and that Indigenous biodiversity values are already adequately protected within the covenant of the area. Now, with respect to that reference to comments made by Richard Ewens yesterday, I'm not and I don't have reference to this verbal presentation. I'm not familiar enough with the site to make a judgment on it, but I rely on his opinion.
Well, what was his, just remind us what his opinion was? Well,
He was saying that the summary was saying that the Indigenous biodiversity values at the site have remained and are relatively healthy under the present regime.
That's right.
Whatever management has or hasn't occurred.
Yes.
So in other words, questioning whether any benefit in providing any other management because the values have persisted.
Thank you. Yeah, that's right.
So therefore, it's unclear whether the applicant's proposal can be considered part of a biodiversity offset or that part of the proposal. As it is inconsistent with the additionality principle of offset. That is that, providing further protection for a site that's already protected is not actually providing protection.
Okay, thanks.
And just finally, I'll just address the issue of loss. Evidence has been presented about the extent of recent loss of dry land ecosystems in Otago, particularly Cushionfield and Carling ecosystems. I recently investigated the extent of loss of Indigenous vegetation in the Otago region at the Western Otago Regional Council. Analysis, and the documents referenced below, the analysis of the analysis used for this was the land cover database. Revealed that there has been a loss of approximately 40,000 hectares of Indigenous vegetation in the Otago region between 1996 and 2018. A lot of that loss is related to lower altitude, so land use change. Evidence has also been presented that carnage has increased in extent at the Rocky Point Bendigo area in recent years. Now, I'm sorry I don't have reference, but it is in the original material provided by the applicant. I just didn't have time to dig it out this morning before I finalise this.
Okay. Right. It's fine.
However, the LCDB analysis cited above shows that there has been a loss of 12 hectares of area demand in the Otago region between 1996 and 2018. Carnage is not separated out in the LCDB analysis. This suggests that the increase in extent of carnage in the Bendigo area is not replicated elsewhere in the region. Rocky Point Bendigo can be regarded as a regional stronghold for this vegetation type, as suggested in the submission of Caitlin. I recently completed a project for Otago Regional Council mapping converted land and inland parts of the region. Converted land is defined as land at which Indigenous vegetation has been completely removed and replaced with targeted crops or development. The analysis I took for this project indicates that much of the recent land conversion has been small-scale loss at lower altitudes for the development of rural residential subdivisions, such as that proposed in this application. It's quite compelling if you're looking at the aerial images, and I guess just to diverse the main example is that the base image that I'm using in the software is the one provided by Lynn, so it's an aerial image land. And on another screen, you have the Google Earth image, which is a couple of years later, normally it's more recent. And mapping on that Lynn's base layer is on just about every screen, you'll see further developments occurred within the last 2 years. There's a very strong development pathway occurring at low altitude in Central Otago, and a lot of this specific term. There's a lot of ongoing loss.
Okay.
The proposed activity will remove low altitude vegetation and for each offsite effects of the remaining vegetation at that location. It will contribute to the continued incremental loss of naturally occurring Indigenous vegetation in Otago region. And just one thing I did want, I had hoped to spend time on, but have time to, but I'll just mention it briefly here. I did raise in my original advice the issue of edge or offsite effects. So in other words, the effects beyond the direct clearance areas or direct clearance areas. And I have referenced some documents in my original advice, but I just want to explain that briefly because what happens when you have a development in an area that it's not the ecological effects are not confined to that site because you will normally have an increase of moisture through water and through wet vegetation. You'll be introducing other species, so you have other property which are potential weed issues. And you'll have often an increase in neutral, which often can run off into those sites. And paper that I was some of the research was involved with, which is referenced here when we looked at piece of opinion plant, which is a drive in the press. And one of the analyses that we did was look at, we went and revisited all the locations these species had been reported at in the past to see if they were still there. And at the same time, we recorded what other species were present at those sites. And a compelling, significant result of their research was that at sites which were now isolated within developed land, like irrigated and pastoral land, the dried-in species that were reported there previously were almost certainly absent. At other locations where that development surrounding that hadn't occurred, the best example is the Kenty Basin, before it's a basin, those dried-in species persisted. And so they hadn't been cleared directly by any land use change, but they've been affected by the activities that were occurring in the surrounding land. Now, it's very difficult to determine what those effects would be at this site, but there has been no evidence provided about what those effects would be. So there's an element of uncertainty about whether the effects of the activity will be contained within those privileged areas, or whether there will be some change extending into the surrounding undeveloped habitat. So it's something that
You say, because my understanding was that there has been some assessment of that through various plans that have been presented, management plans, and there's also another consenting phase, if you like, in terms of either discharge consents for discharges, and also implementing management plans which have that as their objective, is to minimise nutrient effects and water discharges. And as I understood it, that is attempted to be dealt with in this application, and I guess that may not be the case with a lot of other development, which is either permitted or on a small scale different to this proposal. But would you acknowledge that there's an opportunity here to at least control those effects or address it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an important consideration, and it needs to be taken into consideration as part of it. It's public consent. It's not assumed that we know later. It needs to be determined effects.
That's right.
Good understanding of it like that now.
Yes.
And acknowledging that some of those effects are pretty hard to determine.
Sure.
Process issues or microclimate issues, which would be very hard to apply data. So there is the ultimate certainty that should be taken into account.
Yes, that's right. And I did ask some questions about, I wasn't sure about the regional consenting process for if discharge permits are required. What is the regional council considering? What are the matters to be considered? There's certainly some matters in the management plans that have been put to us anyway. But no, thank you for that discussion. And that was the only point you wanted to make at the end?
Yeah.
Any questions from that? No, I think you've done very well to put that together. Essentially, it's not new evidence, is it? What you're doing is you're reiterating some of the points in your earlier evidence, and you're responding to evidence that we've heard. And as I read it, basically your recommendation stands. And
yeah, it does. The point of sitting to start is the key issues.
Yes.
He's provided more analysis behind them because
right. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's probably the most useful thing that can do for your decision making. So.
Thanks very much. And I have been canvassing this potential witnessing of ecological experts, but have you got any comments on any areas what's apparent to us is there's some fundamental differences in opinion between the ecologists particularly on the offsetting, whether it's appropriate to have climax communities or different species. So conferencing normally focuses on ways of achieving things, methodologies, and where there's some agreement on outcomes and so forth. So do you see any opportunity here for conferencing that would assist us?
I don't think so. I think, most of what I presented here, I actually presented in my earlier advice to the process. That's right. And the applicant response, in my view, hasn't really accepted those views.
Right.
Sort of, I guess, remained committed to the outcomes that they're seeking achieving.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that would have been the opportunity to respond and consider. So unless that's changed, I'm not sure much would be gained.
All right. Okay, no, that's fine. It's useful to get that opinion at the stage. So, thank you. We'll move on to the planning. Yeah, thank you very much. We've got some more notes. Yeah. Mr. Vincent, your hands.
Jim, so first thing I'd like to do is just give a quick thank you to everyone who's kind of presented. There's been a lot of work going into this hearing. And it's a very multifaceted, different applications. So there's been a lot of hard work due diligence from all the parties. So thank you for that. Before I go through and address the points raised in the hearing, I just inviting the submissions and evidence presented, particularly from Doc yesterday, suggesting that the district plan was out of date. I don't disagree that the plan is old. It's due for review. But I'm also of the opinion that the panel should be considering the district plan as it applies today to be relevant for the purpose of the application despite that. In my opinion, it's not the role of the resource consent process to patch holes or fix deficiencies in the district plan. Instead, that would warrant a policy response. And in effect, we're applying the district plan as it applies today. In my opinion, the primary outstanding matters that are relevant to the application, whether we apply or whether you apply permitted baseline in relation to ecological effects, the ecological effects of the proposal themselves, the application of the NPSIB, and some outstanding points around landscape effects. I intend to spend most of my time going over those matters, but I'll also touch on a couple of points about ecological effects, reasonable services, and precedent. I made a note there that I'll also intend to respond to the draft conditions tabled by Mr. Brown. But before I get to that, I do note that reviewing the conditions last night, there's some changes that have been made that haven't actually been tracked.
Well,
So I can't, I'm more than happy to speak to the points I can speak to. But I'm not, the points I've picked up, but I'm not confident that I've fully heard the changes that have been made because some of them aren't represented.
you know, that's fine, and it's possible we'll get another set as well as part of the reply. So, but any points you wish to make, and even in general about the conditions, would assist us. You would have heard some of the questions we had on the services agreement, for instance. But any comments you wish to make will be valued at this stage. So, thank you.
So starting with the permitted baseline, in my opinion, I think whether or not permitted baseline applies to the ecological effects of the proposal is one of, if not the key aspects to the panel's consideration of the application. I think that both Ms. Hill and Ms. Warnock have provided very thorough descriptions of the relevant legal principles at play. I would like to raise one point, just an observation in response to Commissioner Ray's points yesterday about the timing, whether we don't permit baseline should be considered. Reading the authorities, particularly the Littleton case, the questions proposed by the court around when a permitted baseline should be applied, phrased in terms of it might impact on use of policy industry planning, or it might also become more confident about it. I take it to mean the panel doesn't need to be certain about any of those matters, only that it needs to be able to likelihood that either of those situations will occur in order to decide not to apply the baseline. Based on that, I consider that such a call could be made reasonably early in that annual consideration, because the burden of proof is essentially not that high. I'd liken it to a notification decision under section 25A of the RMA, where council only has to be satisfied that it's likely to be in effect. It doesn't require certainty that it's going to accept their outcome, only in my experience. I also note that section 104.2 by default only requires a consideration, or it requires consideration of all the effects of an activity that need a resource consent, including those that have the same effects of permitted activity, unless the panel makes an active decision to disregard those effects. I also agree with the legal solutions from both parties that control activity should not form any part of the baseline. That's completely correct, and to that point, that's not something I intended to try and do in either of my assessments. Instead, I was simply seeking to acknowledge the general idea that some form of development could be undertaken on that zone, or said in the person in section 104. given that the district plan provides a specific pathway to consider that as a project.
So just, so the questions about the purpose of the zone, the purpose of the zone and the anticipated outcomes are not to do with permitted baseline, they are to do with section 1041B. That's what you're saying? Yes. Okay.
I think it's the correct way to go out.
All right. Okay. Thanks.
So, in paragraph 8, I agree that the district plan does not currently limit conditions to on clearance site. Rule 476 KA1 of the plan sets limits on conditions vegetation clearance. However, sub rule 2 that will confirm that it doesn't apply to clearance of land as freehold. And the fact that is not disputed by a batsman, it's been main party. So, as a right, the effective clearing is vegetation can happen. Putting it simply, and at the risk of grossly simplifying the test portfolio by itself about the applicant and dog, I consider that whether or not it applies based on the hinges or whether an activity is reasonable for comparison with it's an activity self-defensible, and whether drawing a comparison is of use to the decision makers to have all consideration and application in regard to things like the use of policies, parts of the RMA.
And I'll interrupt you at the risk of you having covered it somewhere else. But in terms of the part 2 discussion, you'd made a comment earlier about the age of the district plan, and that I think you're quite right. We have to, that's what's in front of us. We have to consider in terms of that. But is there any relevance in the argument that part 2 considerations should come into play where the plan is very old and doesn't have reference to the NPSIB and those sorts of things?
I think in terms of the likes of Davidson and Kazan.
Yeah.
I think that can come into the consideration of the weighting of different documents, yes.
All right. Thank you.
So, on the whole, I'm not particularly convinced the applicants provided common reasons to apply from the baseline. The approach they're arguing appears to be that they can clear the distance vegetation to the right. Therefore, from the baseline is relevant because what they're proposing would provide a higher level of protection than what's currently there. On the first one, I don't consider the simple presence of an activity that permits an effect as reasonable to apply to the baseline on its own. Instead, drawing the comparison should be useful for the panel. I concur with the reason that was given in paragraphs 53 of the submissions that effects of activities such as grazing would not necessarily be equivalent to effects of residential development of the patient herself. I also note that the effects of subdivision on areas of significant indigenous vegetation is a matter of control for a fully compliant control activity subdivision in this area. While the sites do not identify significant natural area or significant indigenous vegetation in the district plan, I consider that the presence of multiple species that are listed as threatened and given 19.6 being lost for the land. For example, New Zealand mousetail, Australian Monoroy, which was backed up by Stevens, would warrant consideration of ecological effects under this matter, even for a controlled activity subdivision. And last point, I'd also consider that protection of the extent area would be of enormous relevance to the effects on what's being removed. And this is speculative because this is the application in front of us. But I also consider that protection of some form also likely requires from any subdivision building, including controlled activity subdivision, given that's the intent of the provisions of the rules. Next, given the significance of the ecosystems present on the site, I consider the application of a baseline may also compromise the council's ability to fully assess the objectives of the district plan, particularly objectives 4.3.2, 438, and policies 441, 447, and 414. And then by extension, its assessment of part 2, specifically section 6. So for those reasons, I do not consider it appropriate to apply based on the ecological effects associated with the application. Now, at the risk of jumping in a few steps, I have mentioned here that if a panel does consider appropriate to apply for the baseline, I consider that the reason Mr. Brown and Mr. Beale and the wider team of the applicant would be the correct approach to take in relation to ecological effects. In the event that you do not consider approach to apply for the baseline, I prefer the advice and the expertise of Mr. Harding and Mr. Ewins in relation to ecological effects.
You just help me understand that that's at 13. So what is it about Mr. Brown and Mr. Beale's assessment that accords with the permitted? That's how they've done it. Is that what you're saying? They've applied the permitted baseline, and that's a valid approach if we accept that. So what you're saying?
Correct. So, yeah, so their evidence is predicated upon applying the permitted baseline,
Right. Okay.
and it's a permitted baseline. If you apply it, that says any effects of complete clear felling
Oh, okay.
hypothetically on the site is permitted.
Right.
So if you follow that logic, I tend to agree with the premise that if that's permitted, any protection is a benefit.
Oh, I see. Yeah. No, thank you.
I think that makes sense.
Thank you for that. Yeah.
So moving on to my assessment of the ecological matters in the SID. It's agreed between the ecologists that the proposal will have potentially significant effects. I consider that that conclusion would still be reached regardless of whether you accept the evidence of Mr. Harding as to the assessments from Mr. Beale and the rest of the applicant's team. Whichever way you cut this, there's going to be some effects. There will effects of the proposal will still be more than minor after the proposed measures to avoid mitigating remedy those effects are taken into account. As an aside to that, I also note that we're looking at the adequacy of information and the certainty of our effects. Just to flag that the area around the proposed communal waste disposal field hasn't been surveyed. And I share the concerns of DOC that the discharge of wastewater in that area would likely change the receiving environment through the introduction of additional water, nutrients, etc.
Yeah. Would in your experience, would that be a consideration of a regional consenting process for a discharge? Or?
I did have a very close look at the intention making with I think the application that activity would be discretionary. So
Right.
obviously would have full discretion to consider that placement.
All right. Okay.
In terms of the versions of the district plan services development.
Okay. Thank you.
This was covered a little bit by Mr. Harding, but one of the matters you raised as a point of interest is the application in SIB and its areas.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how exactly how relevant it's going to be to your consideration. Feel free to clarify if you want.
I wasn't sure how relevant it was. That's why I've asked a lot of questions about that, because the distinction between mapped and unmapped, I've gone to great lengths to ask questions about that. So I take your point here. Yeah.
So I think to go through the rest there, I'm not of the opinion that the area will be classified as SNA under the NGS, given that it's not mapped. However, there is quite a waste of evidence from all parties to suggest that it would more likely than not meet the criteria if it was to be mapped. Regardless, clause 3.6 of the NPS applies, and clause requires subdivision use of land, manage any significant effects on indigenous biodiversity using the effects management hierarchy that's also yes, which has been covered in detail. It is a lower threshold than the more stringent provisions for activities inside SNAs, which to my mind essentially boil down to avoid effects specifically provided for by the NPS. And regardless of that, you've still got the overarching objective of the NPSIB, just to ensure no net loss in biodiversity across the country from the use of data understanding. And section 16, we also continue to operate.
Yes, that's right. Yep.
I understand some consideration needs to be given to the meaning of the term practicable for the purposes of just down the effects management hierarchy. The word is not defined in the NPSIB. Based on that, I defer to what I consider to be the normal common meaning of the word, which I've included a couple of different, essentially different definitions I found paraphrased from dictionary definitions. So it seems like stuff is able to be done, workable, able to be developed. I think that probably aligns with the definition put forward by Ms. Woodmore. And I think it does set a fairly high bar to determine when things are not practical. It's because based on the definition of something's able to be done, and I think in a proviso that it's reasonable to be done, then it should be done.
So that, yeah, so thank you for that. In terms of a development proposal such as this, the question arises as to sort of viability of a development. You know, for a development to be viable, it might be practicable to do everything, but you might end up with very few building sites, for instance. And I'm just wondering how that concept of viability comes into, and it might be a legal question more than a planning question, but given that there is some development potential on the site, that does that expectation come into play when we're considering the word practical?
I'll get into that.
Oh, you will, okay.
I'll defer most of that question to council.
Yeah, sure. No, absolutely.
The only point I add on that is I can't remember the exact case, but there is a case for around the panel being able to have regard to the business viability of the proposal.
Right.
I don't know how that would apply to the panel imposing conditions that make the proposal not financially viable.
Yeah. All right. No, that's okay.
So, in my answer to your question, I still stand by my previous conclusions in both my reports that it's practical to fully avoid the most adverse effects on conditions of diversity outside the development zone. And that's essentially through a subdivision plan that complied with the concept. Under that scenario, you'd have residual effects outside the development zone that are limited to essentially constructing uses and services, which are also anticipated activities. You notice the proposed road alignments that is in the concept plan. It was also in the paper maps as well.
Yeah.
And as outlined in my supplementary report, if we're looking at just effects of the development zone, I consider that you'd be giving more weight to minimising offset and compensation for effect or effects on the basis that the district plan provides a specific pathway for this intended area. And to my mind, the applicant hasn't provided evidence that civilization arrangement wouldn't be practical. Therefore, I consider the proposal taken in the whole as it stands today doesn't adequately apply that effects of the environment. In the event that the panel finds that they have, also briefly considered the rest of the hierarchy as well. I agree that steps proposed by the applicant, such as restricting clearance on the lot sites to specified village areas, sympathetic design of infrastructure, to using sympathetic design of where buildings are located, for example, avoiding the salient areas within the development zone, will assist in minimising the effects of the proposal. To my mind, it's not particularly clear whether there could be more done or not to minimise those effects. I also acknowledge that there may be edge effects from the development in the village areas spilling out into the rest of the site by essentially changing the environmental character. And however, given that the rest of the parties have been focusing, essentially they've been focusing their attention on offsetting compensation. I'll accept that the adequacy of those minimisation measures and whether more would be practical doesn't have to be personal to panel's consideration of the application. Similarly, in relation to remediation, subdivision and associated development, in my experience, essentially results in permanent change. Therefore, I don't consider that it's going to be much remediation other than a random statement of, say, for example, trenching works. I don't think there'd be much more to practical the mitigating loss because the loss is essentially true. Moving on to offsetting compensation, I agree with Ms. Warnock that like for like is well defined in the NPSIB. Admittedly, given it's not the interpretation section where I normally expect it to be, I hadn't fully appreciated the implications of that manipulation with the easy way to do it. But I do find that point particularly dissuasive when considering whether the proposed additional plant entity of the offsetting principles of the NPSIB. I don't consider, but essentially I agree with Ms. Warnock that they wouldn't fit that definition. So based on that, I don't think it would meet the like-for-like criteria in speaking through the NPS. Instead, I agree that it should get a considered compensation. It's put to you by the the NPSIB allows for compensation only when all other avenues in the fixed management hierarchy have been exhausted. I should add to that. Effectively, it's like specifically, it allows for compensation when offsetting is not possible. My understanding for the oral submission of Mr. Ewens is that, and supported by Mr. Harding, is that like for like replacement cushion field is highly unlikely to be possible. In light of this, I think that the applicant could reasonably pursue compensation, provided it's important to the opinion score of the NCIB, provided address the higher matters of hierarchy. The reason that we're given, I don't consider that been achieved, but if I was asked to consider the proposed compensation measures, then I will do that. And I also note there that it looks like most of the criteria are shared. So where an expert is referring to offsetting in the group and the bonus pool is the same in the compensation, I don't see much reason why they couldn't be translated. And the same reason apply. At 26, I agree with Mr. Harding's views that there's a level of uncertainty that affects the proposal on emissions biodiversity. The significance of those effects is not under dispute, and I agree that I can see that it may not be determined possible to get absolute perfect certainty as to what the effects are. It sounds like from what I understand, the environment is in this area is regularly changing. There's regular seasonal variations. There is definitely a risk that you could survey the site every day for 10 years and still miss it. I can see. But from the evidence that's provided, I don't think it's unreasonable that a high level of certainty could be obtained. 27, the biodiversity compensation doesn't need to be like for like. So on paper, how can you consider whether a potential climax community or another community plants is appropriate. However, it still needs to provide a net positive in terms of ecosystem value. On this point, persuaded by the Mr. Ewens that the proposed compensation essentially seeks to trade off threatened species with much more common ones. I agree that the compensation goes some ways to address the adverse effects by attempting to replicate the applicant's best educated guess of the future composition of the environment based on historical patterns. And I also accept that the NPSIB, while it's framed in terms of what's there currently, would have to allow for a level of ecosystem change over time, because that's what would happen naturally, and to my understanding, just about every ecosystem in the world, and none of them are static for very long. However, at that point, when it doesn't appear that the NZB anticipates human intervention accelerating or otherwise modifying that actual change. That basis. So, and that ties into the ideas around the certainty of applying the certainty of defining and applying what is anticipated in the class community that might be the case. Overall, I'm not convinced that there will be demonstrably significant benefit that adequately compensates for the significant loss that the proposal will result in. So, for these reasons, I'm not overly satisfied with the proposed compensation we get for a potential section in terms of opinions. Just to touch on tithing briefly. Note that Lisbon has been provided, so this has been accepted by DOC evidence. In reliance on that and DOC's opinion that this population may have been managed, I now accept the evidence of Ms. King. I consider that those effects be adequately managed. So overall, I remain unconvinced that the proposal will meet the objective of the SIB. I also consider the proposed compensation would be inconsistent with policy 5.4.6A, A numerals 2 under 2 of the Target Regional Policy Statement 2019, which requires compensation to avoid removal or loss of viability of habitat, threatened or at-risk indigenous species and vulnerable fauna under the New Zealand Threat Classification System.
That's the operative plan, is it?
That's the regional plan.
Oh, sorry, I mean, is it the operative or the
That's the
operable? Yeah, okay.
Well, I do note that the proposed has similar provisions.
Right, okay.
Notwithstanding that I don't know if that it's like. There are a number of threatened or at-risk species on the site which would be removed. So, to be fair to them, and I don't actually see the immediate pathway where they could fully comply with that scheme without with that provision in the regional policy statement without avoiding those species. That being said, I am going to consider the removal of some lots outside the development zone. I'll give an example of 24, which is located on expanding intact dryland ecosystems outside the development zone. So we didn't get up to look at that specific lot. So is it, but there is a picture, a general overview picture of that site in my original proposal.
That's right.
So that may be adequate to reduce the starting level of ecological effects to avoid the, I could consider the compensation proposed by that to be adequate. In that overall, in my overall consideration of the SIB, versions of the regional policy standards and what's anticipated, and the consenting pathway that's available in the district plan.
Right, and just before we move on, I think in your evidence, in 42A, you said you thought the operative regional policy statement should be afforded more weight. And there was a bit of discussion yesterday on that. Do you maintain that view?
I still do maintain this. The regional policy statement has a number of appeals on it. I haven't had a chance to look through all of the appeals in detail. There's quite a number of them. So I can't fully say whether the provisions around conditions by investigate impacts, but from a very brief look, I understand that it's likely that it has.
Yeah.
So there's still a level of uncertainty in how it will be worded and how it will be applied. It seems like it will wait to.
Right. So in general principle, if you put aside the NPS matters, would you be inclined to give more weight to an operative plan that's an operative policy statement as opposed to one that's advanced so far that it's just subject to appeals? It's been through notification, public submission, hearings, decisions, and now appeals. Would that be a principle you would normally apply?
That would be my starting point, yes.
Would it? Yeah.
Thinking a bit more specifically, if the appeals had been lodged, didn't match the matters that I was looking
Yeah,
at.
okay. So that's the key consideration. All right.
The consideration here is that they haven't fully investigated, which is
Okay.
how and what exactly is the thing.
All right, so that's quite an important aspect, isn't it, really? Because if the appeals don't relate to this matter, then,
Then it's a bit.
yeah, okay, all right, so we'll move on from that, thank you.
So I've got through the fascinating landscape laws, and the panel is set to identify whether there's any other glazing to district planning or if there's any resource consents that I'm aware of. There are currently no similar glazing requirements to what's been proposed by Mr. Baxter in the district plan. The closest I could find in the district plan is there's provisions in our dark sky precincts and our light chapter, which came up recently around large windows on buildings needing their internal light fittings being tilted away or shielded from that window to try and minimize light spill from inside the building to the house.
Okay.
In terms of, but there's nothing that applies in a general, like in our rural resource area or anywhere other than that specific precinct, which currently applies to ASB in the area around it.
Okay,
Unfortunately, to the resources, I wasn't able to undertake a very full, thorough search to our records and had available.
okay,
But in my experience, working for CDC for just over 7 years now, if we have required glazing, there hasn't been common practice. I can think of one example of a rural dwelling on a lot that sits just above the St. Bethans Township, where they have significant amount of glazing on the front facade, overlooking the township, and they've got essentially a condition requiring them to be shuttered if they are still to use.
is that an outstanding natural landscape?
That's rural resource area, 70 scale.
Oh.
So the entire, just for context, basically the visual catchment of the Blue Lake, St. Bethans, is an enterprise number.
Okay. Oh,
And that decision was made having regard to visibility and proximity to the St. Bethans Heritage Precinct as well.
Oh.
And this is speculation on my part, but where we have been imposing, where we might have imposed the glazing conditions, I don't have any reason to believe that be as specific as required by standard.
okay,
I think that's speculation, so perhaps.
right. And just before you move off that, in terms of enforceability, if we accepted a condition on a consent that it be 60% maximum glazing, if a future owner thought that the window didn't quite capture all of the lake and wanted to make it a metre wider, they wouldn't need a building permit to just make the window larger, would they? Or that's probably a broad statement. No, okay,
That only the interest is building it.
right, okay.
If you think it would be used by you, which you
No, that's right, because it's actually more a resource consent matter anyway, but I'm just, I suppose what I'm doing.
I do get points around enforceability and
Yeah.
it's the triggers that council have to make sure that's been applied.
Yeah, and it would be covered by a condition. I guess it's really just a question of how practical that sort of conditions are from council planning officers' perspective and monitoring and enforcing. But you haven't had to deal with a condition like that from all accounts.
And I think on first pass, whenever it's first been built, that we have the ability to essentially prevent works building.
As part of the building permit process, yeah. Okay. When it's first built, yeah.
But you're right that if everything happens to work, so we building it, then definitely.
Yeah, all right. Okay, we'll carry on with 32.
In relation to Mr. Baxter's evidence, I consider that the activity stands in the district plan as essentially the steep opposition. They anticipate that buildings would be totally invisible from view in order to comply with the control activity standards for buildings. And I consider that forms part of the anticipated rural character of the site. For example, for the purpose of applying objective 43.3 and policy 4.2 around landscape and municipalities. Instead, what I can see as a solution that Mr. Baxter proposes is what I describe as being functionally independent. There's still a line of sight, so hypothetically, a building could still be seen. But to paraphrase the specs, the person would not necessarily observe and therefore experience the visual effects unless they knew where to look, had some form of binoculars or something similar to get a closer look, or if they just happened to look in the right place at the right time. I agree with my apology, it should be misread.
Just look, yeah.
That site currently exhibits a high degree of natural character and coherency. I also consider that the site is an important feature, the junction of the Bendigo and wider Whitecliff Trial Mason areas. However, having regard to the evidence of Mr. Baxter and in light of the project pathway that's provided from the district plan, I'm broadly satisfied that the layout and design controls that apply to the lots at the top of the site, so 26, would adequately maintain the rural character in terms of the Agenda 433 policy forward to the district plan with the guidelines and with the design controls proposed by Mr. Baxter.
So just for clarification, that when you come to that conclusion, you're taking on board the comments about glazing and illumination.
Yes.
That's part of your assessment. Yeah.
And touch a little bit more on learning. So
This is character.
yeah, so I'm like that.
Yeah.
I clarify that that's particularly during the day.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll touch briefly on my thoughts around nights and how those effects can be interested in later.
Right.
For the lot adjacent to Denbell Road, so 27 to 30, I do retain reservations about the increased density development in that area. And I consider the paragraph 79 of Ms. Lewis' evidence to be fair criticism of the points raised in the evidence in my reports about the connections between the stables, video station buildings, and these future lots. Particularly, I'll consider that there's no direct visual link between the lots and the video station homesteads associated buildings. But I'd still argue that they are proximate, and there's no reason to believe that a less conceptual relationship could form over time with having essentially a cluster of development. Over time, I also consider that ensuring vegetation between the buildings on those lots and the road, that's proposed by the applicant, would help to soften the effects of those buildings in the landscape. Well, I do accept that there'd be essentially a delay when that happens, and you would have temporary effects while those plants are maturing. I also accept the argument that those plantings will be different in character to the existing large, mature, exotic trees that are around the stables and video station. But I don't consider that to be particularly material, exactly what species vital, so long as adequate screening is provided.
I think the word screening was deleted, or at least the word screening was not used by Mr. Baxter. It was another word. Do you remember what that was? I don't think his intention is to screen those buildings, unless I'm wrong. Go back and look at it.
I think it's intentional to bring.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah.
I consider that having one fewer lot in application would result in substantially lower level of cumulative effect of having increased density in that area. However, that being said, I am of the opinion that long term, the development on those lots would significantly detract from rural character in the area. This reliance on Mr. Baxter's evidence. I've seen that having one less lot could be a better outcome.
Thank you.
On to going around visibility at night. I still retain those reservations. My experience is supported by Lucas. When you have interior lighting and house positions, they can be visible over several kilometres. For example, lights from dwellings in the Queensbury Hills on the way over to Wonka is visible from State Highway 8A, which can be up to 3.5, 4 kilometres away. If you're travelling along State Highway 8A at night, essentially get the constellation of, as Mr. Baxter put it, small prips of light up on the hillsides. There is a put in constellation around. In some cases, consider that can make the domestication in the area immediately obvious and detract from the equipment and undeveloped character of rural areas anticipated by the plan. And no, Queensland doesn't have the same lighting controls as is proposed, but I consider that the density of development that's proposed in this site could result in a similar effect where you've got essentially a concentrated set of potentially individually small lights concentrated to an area which could draw attention to that domestication area from people's experience and things like that. In order to reduce the effects of those lighting, I've given some thought to whether panel could apply some of the rules that have been brought in recently through the introduction of the lights ejected to the Worcester plan around dark sky presence. So I recommended that the panel consider adding further requirement that fixed internal lighting in buildings facing the wooden vehicle, so north or west, being shielded or oriented away from windows so that you're minimising the light that's spilling outside the dwelling. You should say, trying to avoid direct light being directly emitted through windows. And that's immediately similar to light rule 3 district plan. I've noted there that inspection it may wish to pose some more specific controls around, for example, with this how close lighting should be allowed, windows should be allowed before you need to tilt it away or shield it. But in principle, I consider that in addition to the other measures proposed, would adequately address my residual concerns about the visual damage is going to affect at night. And also consider that for at least have some way to address the concerns of this purpose through reducing that emissive light.
Yeah, that recreation zone, the criteria in the plan that Mr. Brown gave us with words underlined as the key considerations for controlled activity, and your evidence about visibility from the lake is there any reference to nighttime illumination from development? I'd be surprised if there was, but do you recall whether it's illumination as an issue?
There isn't specific.
No, okay.
Vision for it.
Right.
In my assessment, that's wrapped into that wider consideration of how it affects the landscape.
Yeah, okay. All right. Okay.
In relation to some of the specs concerning building rights, more happy to get the references based on our. I do think it would be worth just confirming where that's to be measured from. For example, if it's measured from mean sea level, or is it measured from some other points, and for that to be referenced in the relevant positions. That's just in order to avoid future landowners get around it by arguing that it's a different starting point.
Okay. I agree. If it's not the standard use of the plan, it has to be very clear as to how it's applied.
In relation to my suggested condition of the land entered into a QE2 covenant with someone to ensure the long-term protection of the common lands, and the applicant's response to that can be managed through the joint ownership structures and service entities proposed. I do share the concerns raised by the submitters that while I think it's unlikely, the system of solely relying on private covenants is valuable because it relies on the willingness of the parties to uphold their covenant. And as the submissions from DOC suggested, that can sometimes be difficult possibly for the landowners to go forward with neighbours, so it's a potentially expensive proposition. So there is a risk that they may just shrug their shoulder and go, that's about it, but we're going to do much about it, it's not worth our time to enforce it. given landscape and ecological protections do have public benefits, I think it would be appropriate to have a public body or public representative an ongoing party to this problem to ensure that the benefits is maintained. And given I just want to current account process, I think such an organization makes up a couple of examples, but would allow for enforcement on behalf of the public in the event that, for whatever reason, the covenant is to be fully applied.
So so is that stemming, your concern there stemming from the fact that with a lot of conditions you rely on, rather than the council monitoring and enforcing, you rely on people reporting breaches, and that happens all around the district for a range of things, including noise standards and that sort of thing. And without, what you're saying, I think, is without some public body being part of that covenant, they're not likely to regulate each other necessarily for small breaches and things like that. Is that what you're saying there?
Effectively, yes. So on that last point, I agree. That's kind of the risk that I'm trying to avoid, is those that's to be it's not scared about enough.
Right. So you made a suggestion there. It's have you known that to work anywhere else, or would the council be such a public body? Would that be party to it, or is it going too far? Would it be some other organisation?
I've given a couple of examples. I think
Yes.
I think it would reasonably most likely be council or conservation. Probably not some here to say whether they'd be willing to entertain that.
All right. Well, I think the key point is you've made a suggestion. It's probably for the applicant to respond to that, because it's certainly quite late in the process to be considering a new way of managing it, but it's for them to respond to. So,
on that note, was it a
oh, it was. Okay.
So
Okay.
that's where it's
Thank you.
moving on to agricultural skills. The RMA and Heritage New Zealand Waihere Retirement Act do create essential, to my mind, dual roles for management of historic heritage, which includes archaeological sites. Section 6 of the RMA requires protection of historic heritage, which includes archaeological sites from inappropriate subdivision use and development. The ATZ PTA works on the principle that the identification, protection, preservation, conservation of New Zealand's heritage should take into account, essentially take into account a range of matters. And it also prohibits modification or obstruction of archaeological sites from heritage New Zealand. But given this, I consider the panel should consider archaeological effects of the proposal, and in principle, to be wary of approving the application doesn't protect historic heritage and archaeological sites, regardless of the provisions of the Heritage New Zealand legislation. In reliance on the initial assessment of Mr. Jennings, I was of the opinion that the effects of the proposal on archaeological material would be adequately managed. The new limit provided by the executive concerns does warrant consideration of it, given it sounds like the agreed nature of the sites is changed and there's now disputes as to the value. The point the applicants proposed to realign the main subdivision roads to avoid the reservoir and item G 41.773. And it's part of this. So it's second place construction of G 41.771, which is the second reservoir within, I believe it's lots 1 and 2. It has been proposed to be essentially minimised or avoided through realigning the access in lots 1 and 2. So then originally the access would have gone essentially straight through those. that's been changed so that lot one would have its own access and then lot two would access on a shared right of way three on the other side, on the far side way.
Right.
And I consider those measures to be generic private community effects with all the proposal on those activities in terms of the RMA. Notwithstanding that an archaeological doctrine still required.
Yeah.
The other archaeological material identified by is all located outside the proposed developable lots. And I noticed that there's potential that the proposed walking tracks could disturb either none or they may be able people unsafe works may find more archaeological lots. In the concept of a walking track, I consider that it's reasonable that one could be designed sympathetically to avoid those sites if they're found. Through the specific design of a track. Don't consider any reason why there couldn't be sufficient consents to that effect requiring avoidance
Right.
of those sites.
Right. So just to round out that discussion, and I'm actually in awe of you having prepared this so quickly, but just to round out the discussion on archaeological matters, you've agreed that 2 of the sites are going to be avoided, and the walking track, that the off-site activities we like, that the walking track can be designed subject to a consent condition. Overall, what's your sort of overall finding on the archaeological aspects?
Overall, I'm happy that through conditions of consent, the effect can be adequately managed.
Okay. In relation to the suggestion that the site should be completely surveyed, by Dr. Schmidt, do you think that's still required? Are you satisfied with what's in front of us now?
Given the other protections proposed for lot 200 around essentially maintaining that site,
Is that the balance law?
that's the balance.
Okay, yeah.
I think that would be, I don't think it would be absolutely necessary.
All right, thank you. Just needed to capture that. Thank you very much. Right, service provision.
Touching on very briefly on service provision, given TKO have indicated there's a broader diagram standards, I'm satisfied that the effects on proposed of the proposal on the existing road network can be managed based on the conditions that have been put forward. I'm also satisfied with Mr. Carter's assertions that safety features, signage, feature of the subdivision road can be provided in principle, and determining exactly what's needed can be deferred to the applicant's understanding the design of that, the detailed design of that road. I'm also verbally confirmed that's acceptable to the infrastructure manager. They seem that proposition.
Right, cool.
Mr. Carr also identifies that council is currently in the process of reviewing its adopted subdivision standard. So
Actually, sorry, I don't think you need to read the next paragraph. I've had a quick read of it, and I think you're basically accepting the standards from the state of flux and there's been a solution suggested, and you're happy with the wording suggested. Is that right? Unless I've missed that. Down at the bottom.
in several points, Mr. Carr suggested, the phrase unless otherwise approved by council members, I'm proposing that.
Right, yes, okay, yes. I better let you talk. I actually had a concern about that too, but
So, saying roughly just over halfway down, I think if we take a pragmatic approach on essentially a case by case basis, whether to use the provisions of 2010.
Right.
So, and those typically form part of the conditions of consent. If council standards would change in the future in a way that means it was no longer appropriate or no longer relevant to apply an old standard, then quite simply I suggest that could be grounds for a variation of section 127. I also note that the conditions have been drafted with an eye to effects beyond just the adequacy of the infrastructure. For example, changes to the infrastructure layout or design may have landscape, ecological or archaeological implications. Given those aren't matters that council engineers have oversight of, not willing to support that general discretion to essentially any other variations approved by our engineers.
Right, because I put that to Mr. Carr and he sort of relied upon the good professionalism of council officers that everything would be fine, but as a council officer, yeah.
Challenge their profession.
No.
They're saying that they don't have oversight of all the other
Oh.
measures that the commission.
Of those,
All the other measures that are considered.
all right. Okay, the applicant can consider that as their final suite of conditions, I guess. Thank you for making that point.
Motion precedents, I remain of the opinion that the overall application was set a limited precedent. Provided in paragraphs 7.50 and 7.51 in my original 40 report and expanded on in page 27. I don't think there's been any additional evidence provided that would ultimately change that conclusion.
What's a limited precedent?
Given the site, given the sites in a unique zone district, I think any precedent would only apply to that zone. So it would apply to this land, it would apply to the small area of Bendigo Station land where we've observed the vineyards on the site visit.
Yeah.
And land to the south that's also owned by the applicant. And the precedent is just essentially it's in relation to how council reconciles the planning provisions.
Right, okay.
And how it applies the concept.
Okay, and thank you for that. And just before you go to the overall recommendation, the discussion about the conservation covenant and the no build restriction that comes with that, as I understand it. Is that something you alerted us to in your earlier report about the conflict? Was that the key point, or was there another? I'm just trying to recall.
I think that's one of the things. The other things I was mentioning there is the conflict between having a development zone where you can't have buildings visible from certain areas where without significant modification plans back, that's functionally impossible.
Right, that's right. Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, that's fine. Okay.
So based on the application form, I do to me holding the opinion that the application in its current form should be refused. And those are the rest of today and in my revenue reports. That I have suggested some changes to the application that in my opinion would make the proposal more suitable. But regardless of that, I want to put myself in from my view, the council considerations looks like it's going to be pretty finely weighted on a few key points. And those key points looks like they're going to have pretty high implications on whether the panel chooses to represent. So as I noted there, I intend to comment on the dry conditions. I have done that verbally as opposed to writing it all down.
Yeah, cool. Yes. Yeah, probably. We'll take a very short adjournment. It's been quite a long session, but we'll take a short adjournment just for 5 or 10 minutes, and then we'll have a look at the conditions. And again, I'm happy for you just to talk generally to those, and as long as we pick up the gist of any concerns you might have, rather than wordsmithing them right now. But that would be quite useful. But just take a short 5 minute break anyway. But reconvene if you folks are ready. Okay, are you, everyone's ready? We're going to the conditions now. So thanks, Mr. Vincent. Just take us through those, any comments you wish to make as efficiently as you can. Yeah.
So the change condition 1, back with those, they're just updating.
Yeah, plans, yeah.
Condition 3, I already raised my concern about having that general discretion to council engineers.
Yep, so just to recap on that, you would not put those words in, you'd leave it as it is and rely upon a variation or change of conditions.
I'd leave it as I proposed it myself.
Yeah, right, so I understand the logic behind that, but we'll wait to hear what the applicant has to say in due course. Okay.
Happy with 5B and 5C.
Yes.
And it's been pricing templates can sort out through this bottom assessment.
Yeah.
This is a pretty minor change, but there's reference to protecting the cliff feature by minor rerouting. Like my suggestion would just be to remove minor, just on the outside chance that a bigger shift is required.
All right.
I think it was, I don't think any minor is necessarily useful.
But if, just to discuss, if it was more than a minor rerouting, it might have other impacts, you know, ecologically or on landscape. I don't know. I mean, should it not be bound in some way?
I think it's us to some comments that Mr. Brown makes around the discretion for the planning manager.
Okay, all right. So yeah, Ms. Hill, if you wish, I'm more than happy for you to seek any clarification as we go through, because it's but so that was just a suggestion about whether minor is the right wording, and I think the word minor would still give some discretion on the part of an officer assessing it, but if the word minor was taken out, it could be a major rerouting, which could have other impacts. But anyway, you've responded to that, so thank you.
Hitting with no, but yeah, that Mr. Brown's proposed to take A and B out in place of condition 6-12. I might talk to that.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, that's fine.
So you may correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the service evidence suggested that all the lots could have firefighting supply in accordance with like from the reticulation, and that none of them would need on-site tents.
I think that's correct.
Yeah.
I'll check that, but
Yeah.
that's enough.
That was presented as subject to detailed design, so should they not have the recirculated supply that would require tanks.
Okay. I was thinking that if that was going to be the case, then the on-site water tank condition could just go, but it sounds like it's probably best to keep it.
That's for that.
All right.
That being what the and C and D,
Okay.
same actual and form elements. With I think there was some reference made for in hearing to mention was it requiring
Yeah.
obliging sign of all landowners.
Yeah, that's right. I think Mr. Brown's taken that on board, so we'd expect to see some response to that. Yep. Okay. And it comes up else. It comes up later on.
Today's got another reference, got two references to as I was approved, or covered, as does K, K, in
Yes.
happy with condition Q, which is the section of R&D building garage.
Yes.
Where the condition mentions a pole roof standard. So is that question for that, does that have any parameters around it? So, you know, what is a pole roof standard?
This way. So yeah, just you've asked a question, but in your opinion, is that sufficient to have a pole route standard?
I'm just wanting to make sure that when the time comes to issue 346, it's that is limited debate as to what the pole roof
Yeah. Okay, so but just for just what are we? So Ms. Hill, what I don't know if you caught that, but that's all right. No, I understand. Condition S, which is the walking track shall be established to a pole route standard. Mr. Vincent's just asked the question. Is there anything more proposed than just putting poles in the ground? I guess is that what you're saying? What is a pole root stand?
So, if I was a council engineer looking to say that the conditions have been complied with,
Yeah,
what would I expect to see?
So will be the intention from that was taken from the, there's a grading of cycling trails, which New Zealand needs commission similar, and it's like defined terms, in grades 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Right.
Correct?
Okay.
It's defined. And we use that kind of, we have, but hence have feedback in terms of the teaching,
Yeah, I'm just wanting to make sure that,
it is defined.
yeah, as well as define something so that reference to that standard.
Yeah, that's-
You can put that in close to it's from, but it is a condition that we've used in other high country Queenstown developments. And that ground station where they're in particularly sensitive environments.
So that's just to help an officer understand what's meant by that. It would
Yeah.
refer to a standard elsewhere. Okay,
Just like final to put that down and show that's going to be.
okay, all right. So that's yes. Yep.
Condition review, it's recommended that the need to provide telecommunications has been, gets taken out from there.
Yeah.
The section 16 of the district plan will default to requiring it, but more recently we have council as a general practice has said that we wouldn't require it, we'd let it not to be reliant on mobile lines.
So that's the practice. Yeah. Okay.
That's a pragmatic approach because
Yeah.
just don't have landlines nowadays.
Okay.
Where the coverage is good. Just because if there's limited coverage, then it becomes a potential health safety issue.
So have you had any input from council officers on that or utility providers on that?
So I haven't directly spoken to my licensed spark ball owners, but they don't have genuine network connections.
Oh.
It does look like based on those maps, there is a reasonable level of coverage. Well, I think Mr. McPherson, we keep having trouble sometimes.
I can call Mr. McPherson as a witness still.
Yeah, with your planning circuit.
Yes.
So it looks like on aggregate, there's reasonable coverage, but there may be some particular spots that are limited. Based on the terrain, I wouldn't have any reason to believe the specific sites would be, specific building sites would be.
Jules Coy. It's, yeah, it's pretty good.
I don't think it's gone to a shadow.
I'm not aware of not having been able to. The reason I paused it, I'm trying to figure out whether I've ever been in a situation like that without coverage in any location I can't recall. So that's my general understanding of it's pretty consistent.
And with the application would have been publicly notified and we presumably had no submissions from the utility. Do they usually, I mean, I know some of the telcos are quite proactive when it comes to consent applications and they ask for these things, but they haven't done that in this case. So.
And to my experience, they haven't.
Okay, well, we'll move on from that one then. That's
But I think based on what I've heard, I think these to recess.
okay.
It's previously been the Law Commission, either wide or other.
Yeah, either that or something consent for us. So I think, yeah, workshop we can do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Addition to I think speaks to the points that are raised when it comes getting the public into cover.
Yes.
Yeah, management regime, so that. So minor correctional recommends to WA, which relates to future owners of lot 1 to 30 and lots 4, 8 and 9 of the proposed subdivision of lot 2, the 561457, which is built into the south. I think for that's probably best to reference what's there currently, you would be able to remove the reference to lots 4, 8 and 9 because they don't exist here.
Oh, I see.
On the understanding that covenant would be carried out. Others.
Would the words proposed help there at all? Would proposed lots? No, by that.
But lot 4, 8, 9 are the proposed subdivision.
Yeah.
It's a bit.
Yes, that is true.
We don't have any services that we give effect to, other than which we give effect to.
I see. So it's adjoining,
So it's kind of trying to avoid that possibility
yeah, so what,
to get covenant on land that doesn't exist.
so what's the answer to that? Just to delete those references to
The
the,
reference to 489, just keep lot two.
just keep lot two, okay, well,
And then if that was in the future, it can be carried down as appropriate to those.
okay,
On condition Z, the condition mentions that the source of growing material variance be approved prior to this. This is clarified by who. Don't have any particular strong opinions either way. I mean, I think it's just one of those things that is probably better to specify.
So is the origin of that to, it's a standard practice to do that at the A time, but to nominate where your source is coming from?
It would be. I get the, I kind of. No, I think that's probably reasonable. So it gets confirmed at the time engineering approval and counselling, and we can just say, yes, we have their source, this compliant with the condition.
Okay.
And happy with AA.
okay, happy with that?
So. 10 through 12 are Mr. Brown's.
Oh, yeah.
Business. Additional plantings.
Mhm.
And yes, so I think my basic view is that it almost reads that if you're looking at 10, we're going to apply to be done entirely as stage then. So I've got impression that the applicant would probably prefer the stage approach. But if not from a logistical point of view, able to arrange all the plantings.
Yes,
But I'm in principle not opposed to staging it out over a couple of years. I think reasonably that makes sense. And as an aside, it also gives a bit of opportunity to like revise things if 1 year doesn't work. Like 1 set of plannings doesn't work, to think, well, you can learn as opposed to dumping everything in one go. And it happens to be not quite right.
so you're, in principle, you're not opposed to the second alternative, which is the staging, okay. This is,
Right. I'm just making sure that it's clear that I'm okay with the stage approach, because personally, I think it's most likely what would be involved in.
right, and Mr. Harding, have you got any, this is not detracting from the evidence in any way, but if we were to consent to this, we'd be looking at some sort of condition, and have you got any preference in your experience of whether all up front or staging, if you've seen that used in any practical examples?
I haven't.
Okay.
It's just here, but
Okay,
it's quite clear it's a stage project. You may have to learn from how effective your
Yes, okay.
education activities are as you
right,
develop the site.
okay, no, it's useful to have that sort of observation, thank you for that. All right, we'll move on to 11, balance law.
I didn't have too many points on that one. The main thing was 11B, insurance stopping excluded from what's one previously 200.
Yes,
I'm not quite sure how that would interact with. I think it's condition 8 says, and Mr. Peel's, and Mr. Baxter's design guidelines which say that there can't be any fences beyond the curvilege areas.
right, I see. So it's how to practically implement that without putting fences in.
Because
Right.
to my mind, really, like the most people that split stock would be to have a fence maintained, otherwise you're having to react whenever stock comes into the site.
So would that just mean a perimeter fence around the whole Yeah, it would, because it's not internal fencing, is it? It's just to keep them out of the whole property, isn't it? Is that what that says? What?
Well, I mean, if there was 200, it's within the.
Yeah.
Cherry blossom style.
That's right.
Be no stop.
Very nice, yeah, so,
Right.
so fencing would be around the perimeter of the whole property. Did you want to comment further on that?
No, there's absolutely confusion that
Right.
it's the entire property.
Okay,
They'll basically, yeah, the rights of way, you get every time, it's, yeah,
okay. All right,
every parking, yeah.
And I said it wouldn't be possible because you have a public road going.
No,
I think.
Hmm.
If the, so it would be fine. I was just hoping to make, you know, whether that's a potential point where the conditions that consent to the guidelines.
we could be explicit, we could be explicit in the sort of the RPSL covenant laws that would simply be like stop and then combine with this.
all right, I guess that, anyway, we're not here to resolve it right now, but you've raised the concern and it's for the applicant to respond in their final conditions, so thank you for that. We'll move on,
That's what I had on the subdivision conditions.
right,
So it was the land use conditions where I noticed that there's been some material taken out and shifted out where it wasn't construction was.
oh, I see, okay,
Specifically.
It was only a couple of them. So change to conditions 4 and 6. Supplementary ordered. And condition 4 was conditions around maximum height and building coverage.
and they're not in there at all.
So that condition's been shifted to the design guidelines.
Oh, I see,
That's shifted to appendix A.
and what's a comment on that?
My reasoning for including those in the conditions was, I think those general bulk, those general bulk and your design standards should be, I consider it to be broadly more important for maintaining those landscape values, as opposed to some of the other requirements in the design guidelines, which to my mind are a little bit less
Okay,
necessary.
okay, so,
An example I had in there, I think in the original report was the difference between a 26-degree pitch and a 27-degree pitch.
right, so I guess, okay, thanks, so the action there for the applicant is to, if that's to be maintained as appendix matters rather than rules, we need to know the reasoning for that and taking on board Mr. Vincent's concern about relegating them, I guess, into a set of appendices rather than standards rather than rules. Is that right?
I think especially where I opted to include the provision and original condition 9, but then multiple problems, condition 7, that there be at least a limited discretion to the planning manager to allow slight variations there, just so we don't need, just so the landowners don't need a application for reasonable breach of those standards,
That's right, yeah.
just in terms of the interpretation of the consent. So what I tried to do is, what I think is most important and what goes in and leave a level of discretion for the others.
Okay,
But
that one isn't, they're not appropriate to have so much discretion, as it we say.
yeah, I think I've got in heights in some coverage in particular.
Right, okay.
Or to be, or to be a little bit more locked in, or to be more locked into it. I would say,
Okay.
pitch or having air conditioning.
So
So sorry, the proposition is to instead of referring to the design goals as appendix A, have those just simply listed as a further,
The,
ongoing. See if we secure license and those.
so. And the consent act was essentially additional based on it. I felt like kind of considering. The proposition was essentially to keep conditions 4 through 9 as written in something true. land use condition 249.
And
With
Yeah.
the addition of clarifying the discretionary planning meetings actually put mine.
and if I've got this right, your conditions 4 and 9 don't even appear in here. They haven't been struck out. They're just not there. Is that right?
Yeah, conditions 4, so my.
Oh, 4's been struck out.
Six,
Yeah.
struck out.
Oh, no, been, okay. So that has been recognised. Okay. All right. Yep. All right. Okay. Understood.
Going back to Mr. Brown's list, happy with change definition around use from the lower down lots to post the screen.
Oh, that's right. Yep.
With conditions 16 through 26, they're all related to the servicing. And Mr. Brown fully explained why that was when he presented us. Because to my mind, it looks like a lot of those either should have already been sorted at 2B4C in relation to the provision of services or a double ups of existing land use conditions.
Yeah. I think he said it was a repeat of, but I'm not sure that is true, but he said that they appear in the subdivision conditions and in the land use conditions. So I think that was intentional, but what's your take on that? What's your recommendation on that?
I think that, so this is on the understanding that the application is not intended to provide for residential development for the subdivisions given affected. So at the time of the lots were being built, the water infrastructure should already be there as part of the subdivision. The lots that have community wastewater should already have
Yeah.
the ability to convince that.
Yeah.
And in relation specifically to conditions 23 and 24, there seems to be a double up of mining proposed conditions 10 to 10 to 13 around on-site wastewater for the lots that can't, and what the lots that can do.
So, okay, so I suppose the important message there for the applicant is to check that there's no duplication or that the land use conditions are in the right place when they require 224 actions before the subdivision is approved. So Mr. Brown can look into that.
Yeah.
That's probably all we need to say about that, is it? Those ones.
And with the addition of right now, you don't really get confidence about the
Right. So just on that advice note 8, the archaeological matters, that's sort of a repeat of the condition on archaeology. Is it council practice to have it as an advice mode, or is it consent condition generally?
We normally would have a we have as an advice note, just because we can't force.
That's right. Yeah. Okay, so would you prefer that to be the case? Because if it becomes a condition, it's something for council to be responsible for, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't imagine the applicant would have any disagreement with that, but that's their practice. So, okay. All right. And that's it. A very quick run through. We've got all of those tables that Mr. Baxter was design controls, and we've talked about glazing height. But I think we need to go over that again. Plantings on each lot. So these are all bespoke provisions, aren't they, for each lot? Yeah.
I did notice one thing where in next to, I think in the original draft, Mr. Hill did include a lot of extra spaces and extra paper. I don't have any spectacular concerns either way, it's just very sort of that.
Right. Okay. All right. And just finally, the 1.2 metres external lighting, as Lucas addressed that today. That I presume that's a pretty common condition. Is that right, or is it something that? Did you have any comments in response to what Ms. Lucas said about that?
In my experience, I think it is fairly common. It seems to come primarily from areas that have by provisions and dark square accreditation. Essentially, as a way to keep lighting low to the ground so that people can still move around safely. we need to go with that here, significant still.
Okay,
I agree that it would potentially limit the use of outdoor spaces, but I do not. But I think if Alina applies it to the development of knowledge of that condition, I can take it into.
all right. Okay, so that's a quick run through the conditions. I think I understood all of that, so I'm just, the reason I asked that, I'm just wondering whether we have to write all this up, but do you see any merit in that, Ms. Hill, and having written, do you understand all those points that were made?
So then we have to similar lines.
Oh, they're in line, okay.
So I think we've got it, but really appreciate the detail. It's really helpful. Thank you. And
Yeah.
they have also been considering exploring the recently announced decision on, I think it's plan change 22, the lighting
Oh, okay.
and plan change to see whether there's any benefit to include from there as well. So
Okay, thanks for that. No,
yeah.
yeah. Really appreciate Mr. Harding as well. I mean, it's quite amazing what you've done in a very short time, and it's very helpful to us. So thank you for doing that. Otherwise, we would have probably had to give you a week or so to do that. It certainly helped us move things along. So yeah. So we'll before we hand over to Ms. Hill, I just had a couple of key pointers, and there's a number of things that come up during the hearing that you'll be right on top of and ready to respond to. But one thing I omitted to do with Mr. Baxter, I was going to ask him a question about the associative values, the point that Ms. Lucas made about the landscape, the physical attributes, and the associative values. And I'm not sure if in his evidence, he responded to that. He may have done, but I can't remember everything I've heard during the hearing. So if you find an opportunity in your written reply to point us to where he might have addressed that, that would be useful. Another one there's a big discussion yesterday about the conservation covenant. Would be really, obviously that won't have escaped you either. We're really interested in that conflict, the no building area versus an area that on the face of it allows for building. So what that means in the decision-making process, your take on that. And then, of course, the response to Ms. Warnock's legal submissions on the ORP, the operative and proposed regional policy statements, how they deal with the NPSIB and the relative weighting of those two documents. And also, Ms. Warnock presented an appendix to us yesterday, and we didn't really go through it properly in the time we had, but it does include Appendix E, which is a table on the face. We haven't studied this, but on the face of it, it makes some comments about each lot and whether they would comply with various standards. And I think that goes to the permitted baseline argument and other things as well. So if you wanted to respond to that, that would be useful for us. And then the other thing is the status of witnesses. Ms. Lucas and also Ms. Wardell. We went through that today, and we heard from Ms. Lucas, and we were going to make a determination on whether, first of all, whether that is expert evidence should be accepted, and secondly, if it is, what weight should be given to it. Ms. Lucas put her case, I guess, and we'd be interested in your response, having heard that. And that will go to any thoughts we might have on expert witness conferencing, of course, as well, on landscape issues. And then in relation to Ms. Wardell, Ms. Warnock addressed that yesterday, and what I forgot to mention was that Ms. Wardell is actually a submitter in the process, so she's lodged an individual submission and then prepared a statement, and how that's dealt with in terms of the code. There's been some interactions with Ms. Lyons and Ms. Wardell about whether it's to be deemed to be expert evidence or not, and I'm not sure if that came to a firm conclusion, but you outlined some timelines for any expert evidence, and it was lodged after that time, wasn't it? So there's an assumption that Ms. Wardell may not be pursuing it as expert evidence, but we could always clarify that with her. If you have any thoughts on that, it'd be useful to us. In any event, it is a statement we will consider, and we'll just have to assign weight to it as appropriate. They're the main ones, and then there's also the expert witness conferencing. If we put landscape aside, noting that Ms. Lucas did offer to participate in any discussion on design guidelines if we ask her to do that. That'll go to whether it's expert evidence, and also the ecology. Mr. Beale, I think it was, suggested that conferencing could focus on offsetting measures, but I explored that with the other ecologists involved, and I think the impression I got from them was that the offset that's proposed is fundamentally different to what they would recommend, or that they don't support the principle of what's been done. So there's a question as to how far we could get, or what value there would be in asking the witnesses to conference on that. We haven't considered it fully, but any thoughts you might have on that would be useful to give to us either now or in closing. Yeah. And that's all I had for now. Everything else, there's been some issues that have come up through the hearing that we'll be able to address us on, I'm sure.
So the closing then be prior to the conferencing?
Yeah, that's a good question. Normally, no, we would normally not. You would normally not close until after the conferencing. Yes. So probably, yeah, that's good. So probably what we should do then is ask you to respond in your own time, if you wish, on the conferencing aspect. Yeah. If you're welcome to do that now. Yeah. Okay. Sure.
Okay, thank you for all those, Commissioner. I think those aligned with all of the points that Ms. Wilson and I have noted throughout the last couple of days.
Sure.
So,
Okay.
definitely looking at one of the key issues. I guess before I think for now, given the time and we were in proceeding, we're probably just going to make a couple of sort of overall observations as to the competing cases rather than start to go through all the community events and then save those minutes for a detailed reply. But before making those overarching observations, I do really want to thank the submitters and the council for the effort that have been put into the proceedings. It's enormously appreciated the resource that goes into that, and it does assist the applicant, it does assist the commission in coming to a robust decision. So just want to acknowledge that. And I guess related to that, I think, stepping back from competing legal tensions and evidential tensions, I did observe that I think that the parties are actually philosophically quite aligned, and that everyone wants to see a good conservation outcome for the site. And I think that is an important starting position. But the differences in the cases in terms of how you achieve that, and particularly how you assess that relative to what the site is, how the site's currently protected, are quite different starting position. And I think that's why you've seen, quite different sort of legal and evidential positions brought to the table. But I do observe that I think philosophically the outcomes sort of are aligned. So I just wanted to make an observation on why I think those competing case theories are further apart, but all of this will be put in a reply, so we don't need to listen too closely. But I just wanted to signpost because I think it's important for the framework of decision making.
Right.
So there was quite a lot of sort of competing legal submission around sort of the relevance and weight to put on what we say is a private covenant. And we've looked overnight through the various authorities put to you, and I maintain the position that we've given you the highest and best authority to guide that point, and that in this case, your discretion to consider what is a reasonably necessary other matters to make your decision is the private covenant. So I think that, distilling, and perhaps before I say these points, do you have the evidence of Ms. Williams that you can bring up to hand?
I can go online and get that, might be easier. We've been discarding our things to the back of
We're going to pay the councils.
just get that. Yeah.
Next, if you've got those A3 maps, you can bring up Mr. Baxter's.
Yeah, I'm certainly ready, but I'll let to
Attention, Alan.
see if I can find. Got it. Got it. Notes, and we've got the, it's, and I've got it online, so, yeah, we're ready.
So go through page 31 of the resilience events, those are the issues included in map of the covenant area. And then the house itself. You have
Oh,
that.
page 31, appendix 1, yeah, so, yeah.
And then if you also have those A3 pages out for attachment.
Yeah. Oh, attachment element, sorry, yeah.
So, put those maps in front of you to make the point that context is everything.
Yeah.
And I think we've heard a lot about, yeah, as I say, the legal position in terms of when you can go to a private instrument, and if you do, what way to be given that, no, and we'll provide you a bit of commentary on those authorities in written reply. But the kind of what I've got from the department's position in particular is to the philosophical starting point from how the site is currently protected. Came back to the conservation covenant, the private covenant. And it's kind of all key points. First, it went to the relevance of the permitted baseline and whether permitted activities discussed in the applicant's evidence, namely farming and horticulture and viticulture, which the applicant says is permitted, would in fact be fanciful, which would be included by the government. Now, I think that's an issue because if you look at these maps, you'll see the extent of the covenant area is only across a relatively small portion of the western side of the site. And moreover, the permitted baseline referenced in section 104 of the Act refers to the discretion in respect of choosing to disregard activities that are, or effects of activities that are permitted in the plan or in NES. So they specifically, the permitted baseline specifically references those RMA statutory, well, they're not statutory documents, but those RMA instruments, not, private matters. So we maintain that, there is a really relevant, credible permitted baseline. And that the covenant isn't a relevant matter to that permitted baseline. And even if it were, there are differences of opinion as to how it could restrict those types of activities. Horticulture, viticulture, irrigation, grazing, earthworks, vegetation clearance as examples. So that's the first point. And the second point is this idea of double counting or the double whammy, I guess, of claiming an additional positive feature through the covenant and consent notice mechanisms proposed by the applicant. Again, I come back to looking at the site holistically, and some protections in the covenant only over part of the site, but the applicant proffering much more restrictive and active management controls over the site. And I guess it's also relevant here to look at Ms. Williams's appendix 1 map, where the site is highlighted in blue and the hatched conservation covenant comes, across the sort of rest of the page surrounding areas. But what we will be providing in reply is probably a larger mapped area to demonstrate the extent of the private covenant over what was initially 30,000 hectares of freehold land. And again, I say that because it's contextual, and it goes to the point that saying that the conservation covenant, as it stands now, provides secure protection of the land, and what the applicant is offering doesn't give any additional benefit, it doesn't provide a double whammy. Well, I think that context of the rest of that area and if we were to demonstrate how much of that land has been converted over time through horticulture, viticulture, pastoral uses and irrigation, which I mentioned in the documents as to pretty significant threats on the decline of biodiversity values, you would see in actual fact that the covenant has presided over quite significant degradation. The third string of the doc argument, I guess, again, it's the sort of philosophical starting point. We've talked about the baseline, we've talked about the weighting to be given to the positive benefits proposed by the applicant. The third point is the ability for the covenant to act as if it were a pseudo rule in the plan, and I think that goes towards, you know, what weight can be given to the controlled activity zone. And I think the line of argument that the covenant is loosely referenced in some introductory sections of the plan and introductory methods of the rural zone as an alternative statutory mechanism resulting from tenure review, it's a little bit of a stretch to say that the covenant itself is somehow then incorporated by reference into the plan and impacts on weighting to get to a controlled activity development zone. And I say that, and I you know, I'll put this in reply so you don't need to think about it too closely about one of the cases that we cited to you in our opening submissions was the action for the Environment Wellington case. And that was quite interesting because it talked about a restricted discretionary rule for buildings, and I think it was the town belt in Wellington. And one of the matters of restricted discretion was the trustee. And so, you know, that's an example of where the plan would specifically reference a private instrument. So, you know, the covenant itself is not referenced in that sort of particularity in the plan. And we say it doesn't go towards being construed as if it were sort of a clear method or a rule for administration of the plan. And it doesn't go towards weighting of the development zone and the controlled activity rights that could establish within it. And the fourth point, I think, was that it could operate as a way to sort of defeat the implementation of the consent anyway. And again, you know, the applicants obviously have a different interpretation of the covenant, and this is why I think there's real problems in trying to interpret covenants in a commissioner decision or an environmental decision, because there are different interpretations. But certainly, you know, we read the covenant as it has, you know, it's and this will not helpfully cited these in her submissions, and they are here in this rooms as index, but it has sort of laudable background conservation objectives for the parties to observe. But in our submission, those objectives don't flow through into meaningful restrictions on use of land beyond what I sort of talked about in opening submissions being kind of two key prohibitions or restrictions, if you like. The first being the removal of woody vegetation without ministerial approval, not to be unreasonably compelled. And the second being is to erection of fencing and buildings near historic sites. So I don't accept the general proposition that either the site as a whole, so looking outside of the current area, is particularly well protected under the current arrangement. We don't accept that even within the portion of the covenanted area that it would preclude all buildings and structures. And we also make the observation that to date, you know, it hasn't successfully arrested decline of Indigenous biodiversity elsewhere within the covenant control. And I think I talked about the point about it sort of being in conflict with the controlled activity. Certainly touch on that and comply. So I know that's quite detailed, but I just
it's useful.
the point of going through that is I think it's how I see it is the starting point for assessment and how parties have therefore come to the proposal and assess the evidence. And
Yes,
it's kind of like
yeah.
a starting block.
Thank you. I didn't mean to engage with you as part of this, but I have got that covenant open now, and you make the point, and I think it's possibly correct just on first reading that the the restriction on fencing and building is in relation to historic sites, isn't it? It's not a ecological condition of any.
No,
And I didn't fully appreciate that, so you would have. Yeah. Yes, that's right. That explains why I hadn't picked that up earlier, that I hadn't, the visitors are no buildings on necessarily, but
Yeah,
yeah,
so
Yeah.
it specifies the archaeological.
that's right.
But not,
Yes,
the assumption is that covered the whole site. And it's,
anyway,
Yeah.
yeah, so you would have clarified it in reply, but I think it's useful to draw to our attention now, so as we're driving home, we can have that in the back of our minds. We're flying home.
yeah, so
Yeah.
we'll make a plan of some, yeah, well, we'll look at all the, I think, first and put the covenant, but, you know, we're not trying to be a reductionist and saying that it's a covenant. That's what it is. It's an instrument between, parties and, you know, those don't generally speak well to the assessment of effects on the resource management and, that's why I come back to these conservation objectives in the covenant, which are legal and they are to be pursued, and the applicant says that a better way to achieve those is actually through its means of conditions and consent. And so, you know, I think about the committed baseline and again, you know, there has been quite a lot on the committed baseline throughout the case, and I do want to observe that the applicant's case doesn't stand or fall just on the committed baseline. We say it is a really relevant matter, and we say that the comparator required is as to effects, not as to activities. So the effect at hand here being analogized is removing Indigenous biodiversity values through the likes of irrigation and more intensive farming activities, not just grazing, horticulture, viticulture, which we assess as all being permitted under the plan. So that was kind of, yeah, where I got to in terms of observations of the differences. The other observation in terms of differences, obviously, which would be key to your decision making, is how to approach and offset whether that's appropriate and how to define that and conceptualize it. And I just want to signpost that where the applicant's reply submissions will go is that, again, context is really important. And the legal position is actually quite aligned, which is helpful for your decision in terms of, you know, how to do this and offset. I think where they depart is applying the evidence to those defined concepts to consider whether, in fact, the proposal is sufficiently like for like, thus not offset or something categorised as compensation. So that everything evidence still says that it is indeed offset. And when I say context, what I'm going to put, what we're going to put in reply is that a lot of the references in the Supreme Court's East West Link decision about understanding when an offset is sufficiently like for like, or does in fact avoid an adverse effect, was in the context. So that reference to, you know, when it affects avoids an adverse effect was in the context of policy 11 of the NZCS, which, you know, has been the crux of, you know, a whole lot of interesting and robust case law, but it's a really severely drafted policy, you know, avoid specific effects on threatened taxa. And the applicant's case is that we're not operating in that kind of policy framework here necessarily. So I make the point now, but we'll put it in closing that, you know, the offset is a really contextual determination.
Okay.
So the only other matters I was going to talk to you about were just kind of matters of housekeeping, so we can touch on competency and then what will be put in the reply. But do you want to make anything on the observations and stuff?
good job of covering the
We'll take it back. Fine, yeah.
Okay.
So we were, was doing next so we were going to suggest all of that in a revised set of conditions and plans, if any, would be put in writing to you in 2.5 weeks, which would be Friday the 6th.
Right.
But if you're minded to direct conferencing before then that would be after as well. And the applicant is open to conferencing, but it's going to assist the commissioners. We do observe that probably it would be helpful to maybe have the lawyers put forward a set of questions that they would be conferencing on.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, I'm not, yeah, we're sort of hoping for the concept of it, that my gut feeling is it may not achieve much given the opposition, but well, it's not the right word. It's the different methodologies and the fundamental concerns about the NPSIB and how it's been translated. It's more of a legal and planning question, but for it may be premature to ask the experts to try and conference on that, but until we make a determination that, we're welcome to any thoughts you might have whether you think it would assist your case or whether it would assist us, and what the scope of that would be and how it would be defined. But gut feeling is it may not help much at this stage. That's my initial feeling, and there's.
I think the gut feeling is shared, but if there are any even discrete matters that might.
That's right.
Worth conferencing over.
Yeah, that's right. And I suppose we need to ask the ecologists whether they feel, that they know their discipline much better than we do, whether there's any discrete matters where some progress could be made, and that's a direction we could put out to the ecologists, I guess, to consider that more fully. But on the principal matters, there doesn't appear to be any alignment. So we'll think about that. If you have any comments you wish to pass on to us, because we have to deal with the status of expert witnesses as well, and we would welcome any further comments you have on that. So.
Oh, yes, well, I think as of Ms. Lewis and Ms. Wheeler were pointing out these submissions.
Yeah, they were. Yeah.
I may have written it down wrong, but I understood from our conversation at the start that panel had already decided Ms. Wheeler would be.
Yeah, I did say that, and then it was challenged, I guess, through Doc's submission. We haven't made a formal sort of declaration on that, and I think we will do that as a procedural thing for both witnesses. So
yeah. So, but you can reply submissions. But one point I do observe, I think that it would be worth checking, and we can do this. I understood that Ms. Lucas's land across from the site is either part or in whole owned jointly the person that assists. Is relevant.
There are two separate land holdings, jointly in neighbouring.
Yeah, so part and whole.
right, look, I think you've made submissions on. We'll deal with that. We'll deal with that issue and issue a minute to that effect, and then I think if we're to direct any conference, we'll do that as part of that minute. And then at that point, it's over to you to do the written reply. So the date you've given us can be extended out if you wish.
So, yeah.
The 2 or 3 weeks from the time we issue a minute. Yeah. Okay.
That sounds good. I mean, it was just one personnel reply, which would be a clarification that we did not contend with the reports, the ORPS would be given greater weight than the PORPS. We submitted that both policy documents were in conflict with the NPSIB, and the panel should be guided by the NPS principles. And we provided you with some appeals, one appeal on, in particular, the issue of that conflict and so Oceanic Gold's appeal.
Yeah.
And in particular, the point was that the PORPS has added additional and different matters as to offsetting criteria than NPS.
Yes.
But I could go through the point made about other ecology policies under appeal as well.
That's right. I do remember the essence of what you said on that, and basically both documents have their failings, if you like, in terms of the NPSIB, but they do address it. Yes. Okay, but yes, certainly remind us in your right of reply on that.
I've just listed a series of sort of plans, in fact, that might help demonstrate issues to you for that context. So I've talked about the wider covenant area plan, also signaling and change land uses to agriculture and viticulture within the same. I think we'll also get Mr. Baxter's vegetation plan. So at the end of his evidence, there's this plan which shows areas where Kānaka will be removed and where saline soils are preserved and such. So perhaps a pre-covenant area is overlaid on that. And I think that will also demonstrate to you the areas within the water site that are particularly sensitive, such as the saline soils, which are outside of that area. And it might also help if we could somehow get an additional observation of the crucial and at-risk species found by the DOC surveys of that as well, so you can kind of get a more picture of everything else. And you've got the controlled activity scenario presented by Mr. Brown. And our reply will probably also provide a bit more analysis, and that's been worked up in terms of alternative permitted credible scenarios that would include viticulture and more intensive farming on the site.
Okay.
That have been explored by the applicant.
Right, okay. Right, yep. I have to leave very shortly. But that's fine. Yeah, but no, I think it's useful. Often hearings, everything defers to a written right of reply, but and then it just arrives but taking us through what the key points are now is quite useful verbally, that helps us understand it when it does arrive. So thank you very much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just the sort of step standard experience can help frame the way you want achievements. So
Okay. So what we'll do, just to recap, the panel will issue a minute in the next few days, I hope, outlining where we've got to and what the outcomes are from here. But so until then, we can adjourn. And I'd like to thank everyone. There's been an enormous amount of work that's gone into this proposal, and we might begrudge the reading, but someone had to write that. Someone had to go to a lot of effort of preparing that, and we do acknowledge that.
I think it was just in closing for me. I guess it was spent a fair bit of time and effort, resource on them. We've had a look at what alternatives might look like. Come down on the floor, you don't need to look at now, given the time constraints, but there is a bit of plan relating to the introduction of Pino, and yes, really didn't be significant in 1,000 and all the bits probably the path we're going to go down. So, ecology said it's fairly detrimental. There's about 10 hectares, I think, after we were there. And the landscape sensitive that introduction of frog beans, be a white nets at various times of year, and then harvest. A little bit of requirement for housing, outbuilding sheds and other. So from the landscape point of view, we haven't verified or benchmarked this off the current plan, but it couldn't be very similar, not worse as far as the text space. So,
all right, okay. If that's to be submitted as part of the reply with a bit of an explanation, that'd be useful to. You're going to do that, okay. All right.
it's nice time posted there.
Oh, you did too. Yes, you did. Yes, okay.
Yeah.
All right. No, look, thanks very much. I must get away. But thank you, everyone, and hearing is adjourned.
very good.
Okay.